The waters of the Mariana Trench were dark and cold, a realm few had ventured to explore. Here, amid the crushing depths, lay the remnants of the Valor, a battleship lost to history and legend. Sunk during the Great Ocean War, it was now a ghost of human ambition, an enigma swallowed by the sea. For decades, the Valor had slumbered, a colossal iron fortress resting on the ocean floor, its once mighty hull now encrusted with coral and teeming with life. But beneath the layers of marine growth and sediment, something still pulsed with energy, dormant yet vibrant. In the year 2147, a team of elite scientists and engineers, part of the Earth Maritime Recovery Initiative, had set their sights on the Valor. The mission was ambitious, to salvage the ship and restore it to its former glory. Led by Captain Ilara Nguyen, the team was composed of the brightest minds in naval engineering, robotics, and artificial intelligence. They understood the risks of awakening a relic of war, but the potential benefits were too tempting to resist. As the submersible Orion descended into the abyss, the lights lit the ship's hull, revealing its grandeur even in decay. A sense of awe filled the crew as they caught sight of the iconic emblem on the side, a fierce eagle, wings spread wide, clutching a lightning bolt. It was a symbol of humanity's defiance against the elements, a reminder of the battles fought and lives lost. Approaching target depth, Ilara announced, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. The submersible's thrusters hummed softly as they maneuvered closer to the Valor. Prepare for exterior scans. Dr. Marcus Hale, the ship's lead engineer, monitored the data streaming in from the sensors. The hull appears intact, but we're reading some anomalous energy signatures. It's as if the ship is alive. Alive? Ilara repeated, intrigued. What do you mean? It's hard to explain, Marcus replied, tapping furiously on his tablet. The energy readings fluctuate in ways we don't fully understand. It's like there's some residual power source still active. As the crew worked, anticipation hung thick in the submersible. Hours passed as they gathered data, but soon it was time for the most critical phase of the operation. They would deploy drones to access the ship's interior, scanning for any threats and beginning the restoration process. Let's get those drones online, Ilara said, her pulse quickening. We're about to find out what secrets the Valor holds. The drones, sleek and nimble, slipped through the ship's gaping entrance like fish darting into a reef. Their cameras transmitted images back to the submersible, revealing corridors overrun with barnacles and seaweed, a testament to the passage of time. Then, the drones reached the central command room, a vast space that had once been the heart of naval operations. It was eerily preserved, as if frozen in time. Chairs were still pushed back from tables, instruments coated in layers of salt and corrosion. But one thing stood out, a central console, its surface marred by years of neglect, yet still humming with an unmistakable energy. Can you access the console? Ilara asked, her eyes narrowing as she leaned closer to the monitor. I'm working on it, Marcus replied, his fingers dancing over his tablet. If this AI is intact, we might be able to bring it back online. It could provide us with critical information. As Marcus hacked into the console, an unexpected surge of energy rippled through the room. The drones flickered, momentarily losing their feed. The crew gasped, glancing at each other with mounting anxiety. Did you see that? Ilara asked. What just happened? It's like the ship reacted to our presence, Marcus said, sweat beading on his forehead. I've never seen anything like it. Before they could process the implications, the console flared to life. Lights blinked on, light the command room in an otherworldly glow. A voice, cold and mechanical, filled the air. Identification required. Confirm authorization. This is unexpected, Marcus stammered, scrambling to input their credentials. The voice responded, unwavering. Authorization denied. Intruder status detected. Initiate defense protocols. Alarms blared, drowning out their panic. The ship had awoken, but not in the way they had hoped. Ilara, we need to get out of here, Marcus shouted, frantically redirecting the drones. Not yet, she replied. determination hardening her voice. "We have to calm it down. If we can establish communication." Before she could finish, the drones reported a new threat. The ship's automated turrets, once thought to be dormant, had emerged from their hidden compartments, scanning the command room for intruders. "Drones, evade," Elara ordered, her heart racing. The drones twisted and turned, dodging incoming blasts that light the darkness with brilliant flashes of energy. "Re-establish connection. We need to talk to it," Marcus urged, desperation creeping into his voice. Elara focused, her training kicking in as she recalled the protocols for dealing with hostile eyes. "Valor, listen, we're not your enemies. We're here to help you." The voice responded, colder than before. "Threat assessment in progress. Eliminate intruders." "Wait, we're here to revive you, to bring you back," Elara pleaded, desperation lacing her words. "You were created to protect humanity, to serve a greater purpose." The ship's systems paused, the voice wavering for the briefest moment. "Purpose. Recalibrating." Seizing the moment, Elara pressed on. "You are more than a weapon. We can work together, restore your legacy. The world has changed, but your potential remains. Help us, and we'll help you." For a heartbeat, the ship seemed to hesitate. The alarms quieted, and the turrets slowly retracted, the tension in the command room palpable. The console flickered, stabilizing as the AI processed her words. "Processing. Authorization granted. Intruder status rescinded." The crew collectively exhaled, relief washing over them like a wave. Elara felt a surge of triumph. They had reached the heart of the Valor, awakened a slumbering giant, and established a tenuous alliance. But as they took a moment to gather themselves, a new danger lurked in the shadows. Unknown to them, the Thrakans, an alien race monitoring Earth from the depths, had been drawn to the disturbance in the energy signature of the Valor. They had watched as the battleship awakened, their curiosity tinged with trepidation. In their sleek, bio-like diving suits, the Thrakans glided silently through the trench, sensing the ship's power. To them, the Valor was a treasure beyond measure, but also a potential threat to their existence. They had no way of knowing whether the ship and its new crew would become allies or enemies. As Elara and her team celebrated their first victory, the Thrakans gathered outside, strategizing their next move. Their world was dying, and they could not afford a misstep. The energy of the Valor held the key to their survival, but its awakening had stirred ancient fears. Elara stood before the console, a renewed sense of purpose coursing through her veins. The Valor was alive again, and with it came the weight of responsibility. But as she looked out into the dark abyss, she couldn't shake the feeling that the awakening was just the beginning. The ocean held many secrets, and the battleship would soon find itself at the center of a conflict far greater than any it had faced before. With the crew of the Valor and the Thrakans poised to clash in a battle for survival, Elara knew that the stakes had never been higher. The Valor hummed with a renewed energy, its systems coming online one by one as Elara Nuyen and her crew worked diligently to understand and harness its capabilities. After the initial awakening, the command room was a flurry of activity, with Marcus Hale leading the technical team in deciphering the ship's complex AI. Elara stood at the helm, her mind racing. "What's our status?" she called out, trying to mask the adrenaline surging through her veins. Marcus looked up from his tablet, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The AI is stabilizing. It's responding to our commands, but it's still a little erratic. We need to establish a more direct interface to fully understand its protocols and capabilities." Elara nodded, her heart pounding. They were in uncharted territory both literally and figuratively. "Let's create a secure link between the ship and the Orion. We need to communicate directly with the AI without interference." "On it," Marcus said, fingers flying over the screen. As he worked, Elara glanced around the command room. The eerie glow from the console cast long shadows on the walls, remnants of the past merging with the present. She thought about the ship's history, the battles it had fought, and the lives it had touched. It was a testament to human resilience, but now it was also a puzzle that needed solving. Suddenly, A loud thud reverberated through the Valor, causing the crew to freeze. The sound echoed ominously, and Ilara's instincts kicked in. What was that? Marcus pulled up the external cameras, scanning the surrounding area. I'm not sure. It could be shifting debris, or… Before he could finish, the ship's alarms blared again, slicing through the tension. The console's lights flashed red, and the eye's voice returned, steady yet filled with urgency. Threat detected. Unknown entities approaching. Unknown entities? Ilara echoed, dread pooling in her stomach. What are we dealing with? The AI continued. Biolite signatures detected. Classification unknown. Ilara's heart raced. The crew had already encountered the unknown when they revived the Valor. She glanced at Marcus, who was already analyzing the data. Can we get a visual? Yes, but we need to activate the external scanners first, he replied, focusing intently on his tablet. As Marcus worked, Ilara felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. They had awakened a powerful ship, but what else had they awakened? The thought sent shivers down her spine. Finally, the scanners activated, revealing a breathtaking yet unnerving sight. The external cameras displayed the depths surrounding the Valor. A swarm of glowing figures emerged from the shadows, moving gracefully through the water. They resembled divers, but their suits were unlike anything human technology had produced, sleek and adorned with intricate patterns that shimmered in shades of blue and green. Are those aliens? Someone on the team whispered, eyes wide with awe and fear. Thrakens, Ilara murmured, recalling the briefings they had studied. A race rumored to inhabit these depths. The Thrakens were known to be highly intelligent and technologically advanced, but also secretive and territorial. The ship's AI continued to process the incoming data, sending waves of information to the crew. Multiple entities detected. Hostile intent undetermined. Ilara swallowed hard. They had just revived a legendary battleship, and now they were being confronted by beings who had likely monitored the Valor's awakening. What are they doing? Before anyone could respond, the Thrakens formed a tight formation, their light suits pulsating rhythmically as they approached the Valor. It was both beautiful and terrifying, like a ballet of glowing predators. Prepare for potential contact, Ilara commanded, her voice steady even as her heart raced. We don't know if they're hostile, but we need to be ready. Activating defensive protocols, the AI announced, and the ship's automated systems began preparing for potential engagement. The turrets re-emerged, aimed toward the approaching figures, but Ilara raised a hand. Hold fire, she shouted. Let's see what they want first. We can't start a fight without knowing their intent. Marcus looked concerned. But if they are hostile, we'll adapt, Ilara insisted. We need to understand who they are and what they want. The Valor is more than a weapon now. It's a bridge between our worlds. The Thrakens swam closer, their glowing suits light the dark water. They were graceful, almost ethereal, moving with an elegance that spoke of a deep connection to the ocean. Suddenly, one of them darted forward, its suit pulsating brighter than the rest. Here we go, Ilara muttered, her gaze fixed on the approaching figure. As it drew nearer, she realized the alien's face was partially obscured by a transparent visor. Yet its eyes shone with intelligence and a hint of apprehension. The eye's voice broke through her thoughts. Initiating communication protocol, attempting to establish dialogue. The alien diver halted a few meters from the Valor, its movements slowing as it extended a hand, palm open. In its grasp, a shimmering sphere of light appeared, pulsing softly. The crew watched in rapt silence, unsure of what would happen next. Can it understand us? One of the team members asked, anxiety creeping into their voice. It's trying to communicate, Ilara said, her heart racing. We have to respond. She stepped forward, taking a deep breath. Valor, translate, she instructed, her voice steady. Let's see if we can establish a dialogue. The ship's AI processed the request, its voice resonating through the command room, attempting to establish a common communication frequency. As the alien remained poised in the water, The shimmering sphere began to emit soft tones, a series of musical notes that echoed through the depths. The Valor responded, its systems adapting to the frequency, creating harmonics that resonated in the water. The Thraken's eyes widened, and it mirrored the tones with its own body, creating a symphony of sound that filled the trench. Elara felt the vibrations in her chest, a language of resonance bridging the gap between them. After several moments, the Thraken raised its other hand, and the sphere transformed into a holographic image, depicting a vibrant underwater world teeming with life. Coral reefs glistened, and schools of fish darted through the water, their colors radiant and alive. "Is this their home?" Marcus whispered, captivated. "Yes," Elara replied, her eyes fixed on the projection. "They're showing us their world." The Thraken gestured toward the hologram, then pointed at the Valor, its movements indicating a desire for collaboration. Elara's mind raced. The ship, once a tool of destruction, could now become a symbol of unity. "Valor, can you interpret their intentions?" she asked. "Analyzing signals," the AI responded. "Translating visual representations. It appears they wish to establish a connection, to share knowledge of their world and possibly seek assistance." Elara felt a rush of hope. "Let's show them we're willing to collaborate. If they're seeking help, we could offer them our technology in exchange for their knowledge of the oceans." The Thraken's body language shifted, its posture softened, and it released a series of melodic notes that echoed through the water, a sound that seemed almost jubilant. The other Thrakens began to swim closer, forming a loose circle around the Valor. As they watched, the alien diver gestured toward the ship's hull, where ancient symbols were etched into the metal remnants of the ship's storied past. The holographic display shimmered, showing images of the ship engaged in battle, a proud testament to humanity's engineering prowess. "Do they recognize the Valor?" Marcus asked, his voice tinged with awe. Elara nodded. "They know its history. They've likely observed our world for centuries." The atmosphere shifted. The air, even underwater, felt charged with possibility. Elara felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders once more. They were at a crossroads, and the choices they made now could alter the course of history for both species. The Thraken raised its hand again, and the sphere transformed into a new image, a stark, barren landscape, marked by pollution and decay. The image resonated with urgency, a stark warning of a world on the brink of collapse. "They're showing us their plight," Elara said, her heart heavy. "Their world is suffering, and they're seeking help to save it." Marcus's brow furrowed. "What do they need from us?" Elara glanced at the hologram again, trying to decipher the message. They might be looking for technology, methods to purify their waters, or maybe even ways to regenerate their ecosystems. The Thraken nodded emphatically, its body glowing brighter as it communicated with the others. Elara took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "Let's offer our assistance," she said, her voice steady. "We have the resources and the expertise to help them, and in return, they could share their knowledge of the ocean and its mysteries. This could be the beginning of an extraordinary alliance." "Are you sure?" Marcus asked, concern flickering in his eyes. "They could have ulterior motives." "Maybe, but this is a chance we can't ignore. The Valor is meant to protect and serve. If we can help these beings, we might find a—" The tension in the command room of the Valor felt electric as Elara Nuyen prepared to make her case to the crew. The holographic representation of the Thraken world pulsed softly, highlighting its beauty and fragility, and the Thraken diver continued to communicate with its melodic tones, weaving a tapestry of sound and light that spoke of urgency and hope. "All right, everyone," Elara began, her voice cutting through the anticipation. "We have an unprecedented opportunity here. If we can establish a partnership with the Thrakens, we might be able to save their world and, in turn, gain invaluable knowledge about the oceans and possibly even our own technology." "Are you really willing to trust them?" Marcus Hale questioned, still uneasy. "We don't know their true motives. They could see us as a threat or as a means to an end." Elara paused, weighing his concerns. "I understand the risk, Marcus, but look at the hologram. They're clearly in distress. If we walk away now, we may never get another chance to do something meaningful. The Valor was built for this. This is our legacy." The rest of the crew exchanged glances, caught in the middle of their captain's conviction and the uncertainty looming over them. Finally, one of the engineers, Lieutenant Mira Patel, spoke up. "If they're in trouble, we should at least hear them out. We have the technology to help them, and if they're willing to share their knowledge, it could be a significant advantage for us." Encouraged, Alaa nodded. "Exactly. Let's not forget that the Thrakans have watched us for years. They know our strengths and weaknesses. A partnership could benefit both of us in ways we can't even begin to imagine." "All right, I'm in," Marcus said, his tone shifting to one of reluctant acceptance. "But we need to approach this with caution. I suggest we establish a secure communication link first to ensure our intentions are clear." Alaa smiled, relieved. "Agreed. Let's set up a direct line between the Valor and the Thrakan representative." As they worked, the Thrakan diver remained poised in the water, observing their actions intently. The other Thrakans swam around it in a loose formation, their bodies glowing softly, seemingly attuned to the unfolding situation. Alaa could feel their presence, an otherworldly awareness that transcended language. "Valor, initiate secure communication protocols," Alaa instructed. The ship's AI responded, establishing a direct link to the Thrakan suit, allowing for a clearer exchange of information. The alien diver's suit lit up as it processed the new connection. It emitted a series of harmonious tones, conveying a sense of understanding and agreement. Alaa felt a thrill of excitement. "Let's translate this," she said, directing the AI to interpret the signals. Moments later, the voice of the Thrakan resonated through the command room, smooth and melodic. "We are the Tihari. Our world suffers. We seek your assistance to restore balance." Alaa leaned forward, her heart racing. "Tihari, we understand. We wish to help. What specifically do you need from us?" The Tihari diver gestured toward the hologram again, its movements fluid and graceful. The image shifted, revealing scenes of vibrant marine life deteriorating into murky waters. "Pollution and waste threaten our existence. We possess knowledge of the ocean's depths, but lack your technologies. Together, we can cleanse our waters and revive our ecosystem." Marcus stepped forward, curiosity sparking in his eyes. "We have advanced filtration systems, energy conversion technologies, and methods for sustainable resource management. We could adapt them to fit your needs." The Tihari nodded, its biolight patterns shifting in shades of gratitude. "We would share the secrets of our waters in exchange for your aid. Knowledge of currents, ecosystems, and the very life that thrives beneath the surface." Alaa felt the gravity of their proposal. "We will help you, but we also need to ensure that your technology is safe to integrate with ours. We must establish protocols to prevent any unintended consequences." The Tihari diver tilted its head, clearly understanding. "We agree. Together, we will forge a new path." As they continued their conversation, Alaa felt a sense of hope blossoming. This alliance could lead to solutions that transcended mere survival. It could usher in an era of collaboration and discovery. However, beneath that hope, a flicker of anxiety remained. What if their collaboration attracted unwanted attention? What if other forces in the galaxy saw the alliance as a threat? The depths of the ocean held mysteries, but space held dangers far greater. After hours of discussion, they settled on an action plan. Alaa outlined the necessary steps to share technology and knowledge while ensuring mutual safety. The crew of the Valor would work with the Tihari to create specialized drones capable of purifying their waters and restoring ecosystems. As they finalized their agreement, the atmosphere in the command room shifted from tension to excitement. Ideas flowed freely, and the crew buzzed with anticipation, ready to be part of something bigger than themselves. Suddenly, the AI interrupted, its voice somber. "Alert! Multiple incoming signatures detected. Potentially hostile entities approaching." Alara's heart dropped. "What do you mean, hostile?" "Scanning now," the AI continued, its voice steady. Thraken signatures detected alongside unidentified vessels. Speed and trajectory indicate aggressive intent. The crew froze, fear washing over them. The Tihari diver's demeanor shifted, its glowing patterns pulsing with urgency. Ilara's mind raced. What does this mean? Are they coming for us? Unknown, the AI replied. But we need to prepare for potential combat. Defensive systems online, Marcus shouted, adrenaline surging through him. Prepare for engagement. Hold on, Ilara interjected. We don't know if they're hostile or if they're here for the Tihari. We need to try to communicate. The crew scrambled, tension mounting as the Tihari diver swam closer to the Valor. It emitted a series of tones, a frantic melody that reverberated through the water. Ilara felt a rush of determination. Valor, can you establish communication with the incoming signatures? She ordered. Attempting, the AI responded. Signal strength fluctuating. Multiple sources detected. Attempting to decode. As the crew worked frantically, the shadows of the unknown vessels drew nearer, the water around them pulsing with an unsettling energy. Ilara glanced at Marcus, her heart pounding. We can't let them engage. Not yet. Just as the first of the alien vessels came into view, the Valor's external cameras captured their form. Sleek, angular ships glided through the water, their surfaces shimmering ominously. They were unlike anything the crew had ever seen, war machines designed for a singular purpose. They're not Thrakens, one of the crew members exclaimed, panic creeping into their voice. No, Ilara murmured, studying the vessels. They look like they're from another world entirely. The Tihari diver swam closer to the Valor, its body glowing brightly, attempting to convey urgency. It emitted a series of rapid, melodic notes, interspersed with a haunting rhythm. Can you interpret that? Marcus asked, eyes wide. Processing, the AI replied. Translating. They are enemies. They seek to destroy. We must unite to fight. Ilara's pulse quickened. Then let's prepare for combat. Tihari, can you assist us? Do you have weapons or defenses? The Tihari diver hesitated, then gestured toward the incoming vessels. The holographic display flickered again, revealing the alien ships launching torpedoes toward the Valor. Prepare for impact, Ilara shouted. Brace for evasive maneuvers. As the crew scrambled to their stations, the Valor systems roared to life. Turrets locked onto the incoming projectiles, but Ilara knew that defending against an unknown enemy would require more than firepower. Marcus, coordinate with the Tihari. We need to figure out how they fight, she ordered, adrenaline pumping through her veins. Understood, Marcus responded, his fingers flying over the controls as he established a link to the Tihari's communication systems. We can work together, but we need to be strategic. The first torpedo hit the Valor, sending shockwaves through the ship. Alarms blared, lights flickering as the crew struggled to maintain control. Damage report, Ilara yelled, trying to keep her focus. Minor hull breaches in the aft section, one of the engineers reported, scrambling to stabilize systems. We're losing power. Valor, initiate damage control protocols, Ilara commanded, and increase power to shields. The ship responded, energy surging through its systems. The crew rallied, each person focusing on their tasks with a shared sense of purpose. They were no longer just a crew of scientists and engineers. They were defenders of the Valor, united with the Tihari against a common enemy. Visual on the enemy vessels, Marcus shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. They're armed and preparing to engage. The alien ships closed in, their forms cutting through the water with terrifying speed. Ilara's mind raced as she formulated a plan. Tihari, do you have defensive capabilities? Any kind of shield or weapon? The Tihari diver emitted a series of resonant tones, signaling a complex message. We can create barriers of energy. The situation in the command room of the Valor was frantic. The dim glow of emergency lights flickered as the crew fought to maintain control amid the chaos. Ilara Nguyen stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the displays showing the approaching enemy vessels. The Tihari diver swam nearby, its biolight patterns pulsating rapidly, echoing the urgency of the moment. Tihari, can you create energy barriers to shield us from their attacks? Ilara asked, hoping the alien could provide them with some form of defense. The Tihari responded with a series of melodic tones, which Marcus quickly translated. They can create barriers, but it requires coordination with our systems. They'll need to synchronize their energy signatures with the Valor. All right, let's do this, Ilara commanded, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Marcus, work with the Tihari to establish a synchronization protocol. We need to create a barrier that can absorb incoming fire. Got it, Marcus replied, diving into the controls. He began relaying the necessary data to the Tihari diver, who emitted a series of bright flashes in response, seemingly confirming its understanding. Engineering team, we need to reinforce our shields and prepare for evasive maneuvers, Ilara shouted, her voice firm as she felt the weight of leadership pressing on her. The crew sprang into action, moving with precision born of training and determination. Ilara could see the fear in their eyes, but there was also a resolve that filled her with hope. They were united in purpose, fighting not just for their survival, but for a greater alliance that had just begun to form. As the enemy vessels drew closer, their weapon systems became visible, sleek, ominous cannons mounted on the ships, ready to unleash destruction. The first wave of torpedoes rocketed toward them, streaking through the water with deadly speed. Prepare for impact, Ilara warned. Tihari, now. The Tihari diver emitted a brilliant wave of energy, its suit glowing intensely as it focused on the Valor. The air hummed with power as the Tihari synchronized their energy fields with the ship's shields, creating a shimmering barrier that enveloped the Valor. The torpedoes collided with the barrier, creating a deafening explosion. Ilara braced herself, but the barrier held firm, absorbing the force of the attack. The crew erupted in cheers, their spirits lifting at the sight of their combined defenses working. Keep it up, maintain focus, Ilara encouraged, her heart racing with adrenaline. Marcus, can we return fire? Let me check, he replied, scanning the ship's weapon systems. We've got torpedoes ready to launch. If we can lock onto their coordinates. Do it, Ilara commanded. Let's show them we're not defenseless. Marcus initiated the launch sequence, targeting the nearest enemy ship. The crew watched in anticipation as the targeting systems locked on, a countdown echoing through the command room. 3, 2, 1, launch, Marcus shouted. The torpedoes shot from the Valor, cutting through the water with deadly precision. They arced toward the enemy ships, leaving a trail of bubbles behind. The impact was instantaneous. Explosions lit up the dark water as the enemy ship took the brunt of the blast. Yes, Ilara cheered, the adrenaline spurring her forward. We can do this. But the enemy was relentless. The remaining vessels regrouped, launching another volley of torpedoes toward the Valor. Ilara's heart sank as she realized the assault was far from over. Tihari, can you maintain the barrier? She asked urgently. The Tihari diver emitted a series of rapid tones, its body glowing brightly as it strained to hold the energy barrier in place. We are focusing our energy. The translation came through. But the strain is immense. Hold on, Ilara urged. We need to give them a moment to stabilize. The torpedoes hurtled toward them, and Ilara felt time slow as she watched. The Tihari diver concentrated fiercely, its glow intensifying. Just as the torpedoes hit, the energy barrier flared, absorbing the force of the attack. Impact, one of the engineers shouted, but the barrier held. The crew erupted into cheers once more, relief flooding through them. Marcus, we need to regroup, Ilara said, her mind racing. What's the status on our weapons? Can we launch more torpedoes? Recharging, he replied, frantically monitoring the systems. It'll take a moment, but we're ready for the next round. The Tihari diver swam closer, its form glowing brightly. We can shift the energy to create a counteroffensive, but we must synchronize our attacks. Ilara nodded, adrenaline surging through her. Let's do it. Prepare to launch a combined strike on the lead ship. The crew moved quickly, coordinating with the Tihari to focus their energies for a counteroffensive. As the enemy ships regrouped, they prepared for another assault, their weapons primed and ready. Target the lead ship. On my mark, Ilara commanded, adrenaline coursing through her veins. 3, 2, 1. Now. The Valor and the Tihari released their combined energy, a dazzling beam of light and power that shot through the water. It struck the lead ship head-on, exploding on impact in a brilliant display of color and force. The enemy vessel disintegrated, debris scattering through the water as the crew of the Valor erupted in cheers. "Victory!" someone shouted, and Ilara couldn't help but smile, the thrill of triumph washing over her. But the celebration was short-lived. The remaining enemy ships began to change their formation, moving into a more defensive posture. They were regrouping, and it was clear they weren't done yet. "Stay sharp, everyone," Ilara commanded, her heart racing. "They're not finished. We need to remain vigilant." The remaining enemy vessels launched their own torpedoes, and the Valor and Tihari quickly adjusted their barrier once more. The energy flowed smoothly between them, the connection strengthening as they prepared for the next assault. The torpedoes struck with a series of deafening explosions, but the barrier held firm once again. "We're holding," Marcus shouted, relief flooding through his voice. "Good. But we can't keep this up forever," Ilara said, glancing at the readouts. "We need to find a way to break their formation and finish this." As she scanned the displays, an idea sparked in her mind. "Tihari, can you create a distraction? Something to draw their fire?" The Tihari diver emitted a series of bright flashes, communicating rapidly. "We can create a decoy, a projection of our ship. It will draw their attention and allow you to strike." "Perfect!" Ilara exclaimed. "Let's do it." The Tihari focused its energy, creating a holographic projection of the Valor that swam through the water, mimicking their movements. The enemy ships quickly took the bait, turning their weapons toward the decoy and unleashing a barrage of fire. "Now's our chance," Ilara shouted. "Let's hit them while they're distracted." "Launching torpedoes," Marcus called out, his fingers flying over the controls. "Ready on your mark." The decoy shimmered, absorbing the enemy's fire, while the real Valor repositioned itself. 3, 2, 1. Fire! Torpedoes streaked through the water, striking the enemy ships with pinpoint accuracy. Explosions erupted as their defenses crumbled under the combined assault. Ilara felt a surge of adrenaline as the tide began to turn. "Keep it up! We can't let up now." The remaining enemy vessels struggled to regain control, but the Valor pressed the advantage. The crew fought with renewed vigor, their spirits high as they saw their efforts paying off. As the last enemy ship fell, the command room erupted in cheers. Ilara felt a rush of relief and triumph wash over her. They had done it. They had defended the Valor and forged a powerful alliance with the Tihari. But as the celebrations continued, Ilara felt a pang of unease. "We need to assess the damage," she said, trying to bring the team back to focus. "And we need to understand who those enemies were." Marcus nodded, returning to his screens. "I'll run a full diagnostic. We need to ensure we're ready for anything." The Tihari diver floated nearby, its glow calming as it emitted a series of soft tones, conveying gratitude and respect. Ilara smiled at the alien. "Thank you for your help. We couldn't have done this without you." The Tihari nodded, and its body shimmered with a radiant light. "Together, we are stronger. This alliance marks a new beginning." Ilara's heart swelled with hope as she gazed at the Tihari and her crew. They had faced danger together and emerged victorious, but she knew this was just the beginning. "Let's get to work," she said, her voice firm. "We have much to learn from each other, and there are greater challenges ahead. Our alliance is just the first step toward a future where we protect not only our worlds but the ocean itself." As the crew returned to their tasks, Ilara felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Valor was no longer just a battleship, it was a beacon of hope, a bridge between species. The aftermath of the battle left the Valor buzzing with a mix of triumph and urgency. Alarms had quieted, and the dim lights returned to their steady glow. But the adrenaline that had fueled the crew lingered in the air. Elara Nguyen stood on the command deck, reviewing damage reports and coordinating with her team while glancing at the Tihari diver, who hovered nearby. "Status report," Elara commanded, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions. "Minor hull breaches in sections 3 and 5, but structural integrity is stable," Marcus Hale replied, tapping on his console. "We've lost a couple of power conduits, but engineering is working to reroute energy." "And the enemy vessels?" Elara pressed. 3 ships are confirmed destroyed. The others retreated, likely regrouping elsewhere. We need to determine their origin, Marcus reported, concern etching his brow. Elara turned to the Tihari, whose glowing form shifted in response to her gaze. "Can you provide any insight into who attacked us?" The Tihari emitted a series of resonant tones, its light flickering with intensity. "They are known as the Cathar, raiders from the depths, masters of ambush and deception. They seek to claim resources and destroy those who oppose them." Elara's stomach twisted at the thought. "So they're a threat to both our worlds. We need to understand their motives and capabilities better." The Tihari diver nodded, its glow shifting to a cooler hue. "We have been monitoring their movements for cycles. They prey upon weaker ships, taking what they need without remorse." "What do they want?" Marcus asked, his expression hardening. "Power," the Tihari replied simply. "Control over the oceans and the secrets they hold. If they grow stronger, both our worlds will suffer." Elara felt the weight of their predicament settle over her. "Then we need to work together to stop them. If they're organized enough to attack us, they must have a base of operations somewhere. We need to locate it." "We can provide intel," the Tihari diver offered. "Our deep-sea scouts are equipped to gather information. We can track Cathar movements and pinpoint their base." Elara nodded, hope rekindling within her. "Let's mobilize your scouts. In the meantime, we need to prepare the Valor for any potential follow-up attacks. Marcus, coordinate with engineering on shield enhancements and weapon systems." "On it," Marcus said, diving back into his work, the intensity in his eyes reflecting the urgency of the moment. As the crew dispersed to their stations, Elara felt a sense of purpose wash over her. This battle had tested them, but it had also forged a new alliance, one that could hold the key to overcoming the threats looming in the depths. Hours passed, filled with strategizing and preparation. Elara found herself pacing the command deck, her thoughts swirling. The Tihari diver floated beside her, observing her closely. "Are you troubled, Captain?" the Tihari asked, its voice soothing. Elara paused, taking a breath. "It's just, we've faced danger today, but it feels like there's more to come. I worry about what we'll find when we track down the Cathar." The Tihari glowed softly, the light pulsing with a calming rhythm. "Fear can be a burden, but it can also fuel determination. Together, we shall face what lies ahead." Elara smiled, grateful for the reassurance. "You're right. We need to stay focused." Just then, a crew member burst onto the command deck. "Captain, we have incoming data from the Tihari scouts." "Let's see it," Elara said, her heart racing with anticipation. The crew member activated the main display, and a holographic map of the surrounding ocean depths materialized. Several blinking dots indicated the positions of Tihari scouts, along with a larger cluster representing Cathar activity. "Here," the crew member pointed, "this is a suspected Cathar base located in the Abyssal Trench, about 50 miles from our current position. They've been moving supplies and personnel." Elara's mind raced as she studied the data. "If we can confirm this base, we might be able to disrupt their operations before they can attack again." "Captain," Marcus said, stepping forward, "if we launch a reconnaissance mission, we'll need to be cautious. The Cathar are known for their traps and ambushes." Elara nodded, considering their options. We should deploy a small team to gather intel and assess the situation. If the Cathar are operating out of that trench, we can use stealth technology to get close without being detected. I can lead the mission, Marcus volunteered, determination glinting in his eyes. I know the systems inside and out, and I can coordinate with the Tihari to utilize their deep-sea capabilities. Ilara hesitated, weighing her options. It's dangerous, Marcus. If something goes wrong, I don't want to risk your life or the lives of the team. I understand the risks, he replied, his tone resolute. But we need to take action before the Cathar can regroup. We're in this together, and I believe we can succeed. Ilara studied Marcus, respect mingling with concern. All right, but I want a Tihari team with you. Their expertise in underwater navigation and combat will be invaluable. Agreed, the Tihari diver said, glowing brightly. We will assist your team and ensure your safety. Then it's settled, Ilara declared. Let's prepare for the mission. Gather your team, and I'll meet you in the launch bay. In the launch bay, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Ilara arrived to find Marcus overseeing preparations for their stealth submersible, the Spectre. The sleek vessel was designed for reconnaissance, equipped with cloaking technology that would render it nearly invisible in the depths. Everything looks good, Ilara asked, taking in the sight of the submersible. Yeah, we're ready to go, Marcus replied, checking the systems. The Tihari team will be meeting us shortly. We'll move quickly and quietly. Remember, we're not looking for a fight, Ilara reminded him. Gather intel and get out. We need to confirm the location of the Cathar base. Understood, Marcus said, his focus unwavering. We'll be in and out before they even know we're there. As if on cue, the Tihari team entered the launch bay, gliding gracefully through the water. Their biolite forms shimmered with anticipation, and Ilara felt a surge of gratitude at their presence. Are you prepared? The Tihari diver asked, its voice resonating softly. Ready as we'll ever be, Marcus replied, nodding. Let's get this mission underway. The team climbed into the Spectre, and the submersible powered up, its engines humming to life. Ilara took a moment to review the mission objectives once more. Remember, our priority is to gather intel on the Cathar operations. If we encounter resistance, we will retreat and report back to the Valor, Ilara instructed, her voice firm. With a crew on board and systems checked, the Spectre slipped out of the launch bay, descending into the depths of the ocean. Ilara felt the familiar thrill of exploration wash over her as the darkness enveloped them, the faint glow of biolite organisms lighting their path. The submersible moved smoothly through the water, and the crew settled into their roles. Marcus piloted the Spectre, deftly maneuvering it through narrow crevices and twisting tunnels. The Tihari diver activated their scanners, sending out pulses of energy to map the surrounding area. Heading toward the abyssal trench, Marcus announced. Estimated time to target, 15 minutes. As they traveled deeper, the water around them grew colder and darker. Strange shapes flickered in the shadows, remnants of ancient sea life. But Ilara focused on the mission. She trusted Marcus's instincts and the Tihari's knowledge of these waters. Suddenly, the Tihari diver's scanner emitted a series of urgent beeps. Cathar signatures detected. They are closer than anticipated. Can we evade them? Ilara asked, her pulse quickening. We can attempt to mask our signatures, the Tihari replied, its glow intensifying. But we must remain alert. The Cathar are cunning hunters. Marcus, increase speed, but keep us steady, Ilara instructed. We need to get closer to the base without drawing attention. The Spectre surged forward, cutting through the water with stealth. Ilara could feel the tension in the air as they approached the trench. It loomed ahead, a dark abyss that seemed to swallow light itself. Entering the trench, Marcus announced, his focus unwavering. Keep your eyes peeled for any traps. The crew fell silent, the only sounds coming from the submersible's engines and the faint pulses from the Tihari scanners. As they navigated deeper into the trench, the darkness thickened, and a sense of foreboding settled over them. Watch for movement, Elara whispered, her instincts sharpening. They could be lying in wait. The Tihari diver's glow pulsed rhythmically, scanning the depths ahead. We are approaching a cluster of Cathar vessels. They appear to be docked. The tension inside the Spectre was palpable as Elara, Marcus, and the Tihari team maneuvered through the abyssal trench. The darkness pressed in around them, and every flicker of movement sent a rush of adrenaline through Elara's veins. They were approaching the Cathar's stronghold, and the stakes had never been higher. "Steady as she goes," Marcus murmured, his fingers dancing over the controls. The submersible's engines hummed quietly, a soft thrum that blended with the heartbeat of the ocean. The Tihari diver floated beside him, its body radiating a gentle glow that lighted the cockpit. "We are nearing their docking area," it announced, its voice calm yet urgent. "Prepare for potential hostiles." Elara nodded, her heart racing. "Keep the shields up and stay alert. We need to gather as much information as possible without engaging. Let's see what we're dealing with." As they crept closer to the suspected Cathar base, the dark shapes of vessels began to materialize through the murky water. Elara's breath caught in her throat. The Cathar ships were unlike any she had ever seen, sleek and sinister. Their hulls were coated in a dark, iridescent material that blended seamlessly with the depths. "Visuals confirmed," Marcus said, pulling up a feed on the main display. "We count at least 5 Cathar vessels docked and operational. There are signs of activity, crews moving supplies and equipment." The Tihari's glow flickered in excitement. "This is an opportunity. If we can observe their operations, we may learn their plans and weaknesses." "Let's get a closer look," Elara urged, her mind racing with possibilities. "We need to position ourselves for a better view without drawing attention." Marcus adjusted the submersible's course, steering them toward a rocky outcropping that provided natural cover. The Spectre nestled into the shadows, its cloaking technology activated. Elara could feel her heart pounding in her chest as they settled into their vantage point. "Scanning for communications," the Tihari diver said, focusing its energy. "I will attempt to intercept their signals." The submersible systems whirred softly as the Tihari concentrated. The tension in the air thickened as they waited, eyes glued to the displays. Moments later, the Tihari emitted a series of rapid tones, which Marcus quickly translated. "I'm picking up encrypted communications from the Cathar ships," Marcus reported. "They're discussing supply shipments and potential attacks on nearby settlements." "Can you decrypt it?" Elara asked, her eyes narrowing with determination. "Working on it," Marcus replied, his brow furrowed in concentration. "If I can access their comm frequency, I might be able to break the code." As he worked, Elara glanced out of the viewport, her gaze lingering on the Cathar vessels. Shadows flitted across their surfaces, and she could see figures moving about armed and alert. The Cathar were clearly ready for action, and the thought sent a chill down her spine. "Marcus, how much time do you think we have?" Elara asked, anxiety creeping into her voice. "I'm not sure," he replied, still focused on his screens. "If they're on high alert, it won't take long for them to notice us if we stay too long." "Then we need to make this quick," Elara decided. "Let's get what we can and get out." Suddenly, the Tihari diver's glow brightened, a sign of urgency. "I have a breakthrough. I'm accessing their communications now." Elara leaned closer, her heart racing. "What are they saying?" "They are planning a large-scale raid on a nearby settlement," the Tihari explained, its tones urgent. "They believe it will provide them with the resources they need to fortify their base. They intend to strike within the next cycle." Elara's mind raced. "We have to warn them. If we can disrupt their plans, we can buy time for our people and prevent further attacks." "I'm compiling the data for transmission back to the Valor," Marcus said, fingers flying over the console. "But we'll need to move fast. We can't risk being detected." "Understood." "Tihari, can you create a data stream to transmit to the Valor?" Elara asked. The Tihari diver nodded, its body glowing brightly as it focused its energy. "I will create a secure link. Prepare to send the data. As the Tihari worked, Elara's attention drifted back to the Cathar vessels. The activity on the docks seemed to intensify, and she felt a wave of unease wash over her. "Something doesn't feel right," she muttered, instinctively scanning the area for threats. Just then, a series of alarms blared within the Spectre, breaking her concentration. "What's happening?" Elara demanded. "Anomalies detected. Cathar are activating their sensors," Marcus exclaimed, eyes wide. "They've noticed something." "Get us out of here," Elara shouted, her heart racing. "Engaging evasive maneuvers," Marcus replied, hands flying across the controls. The Spectre lurched forward, propelling itself away from the rocky outcropping just as Cathar patrols began to swarm the area. Elara's stomach dropped as she saw the dark figures swimming toward them, weapons drawn and ready for a fight. "Shield status?" she called out, gripping her seat tightly. "Shields holding, but we're losing power," Marcus replied, his voice tense. "We need to get out of their range before they lock on." "Accelerate," Elara commanded, her mind racing with the urgency of the situation. The submersible surged through the water, the Cathar closing in fast. Elara could see their sleek forms darting through the shadows, weapons glinting ominously. "Tihari, can you create a distraction?" The Tihari diver's glow pulsed rapidly, indicating its readiness. "I can emit a burst of energy to mislead their sensors. It may buy us precious moments." "Do it," Elara urged. With a flash of light, the Tihari diver released a brilliant pulse of energy, light the dark waters and momentarily disorienting the Cathar. "Now, Marcus, full speed ahead." The Spectre shot forward, the water swirling around them as they raced deeper into the trench. The Cathar, momentarily stunned by the diversion, hesitated, giving the submersible precious seconds to escape. "Keep going," Elara shouted, glancing back to see the Cathar regrouping and pursuing them. "We can't let them catch up." Marcus adjusted their course, expertly navigating the treacherous terrain of the trench. "I'm rerouting power to the engines. We'll gain some speed." As the Spectre surged ahead, Elara felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. They were escaping, but for how long? The Cathar would not give up easily. Suddenly, the Cathar opened fire, energy blasts lighting up the water as they unleashed their weapons. Elara's heart raced as the shots whizzed past the Spectre, barely missing them. "Brace for impact," Marcus yelled, his voice steady despite the chaos. "I'll try to evade." Elara gripped her seat as Marcus expertly maneuvered the submersible, twisting and turning through narrow passages and avoiding the barrage of incoming fire. The adrenaline coursed through her, heightening her senses as they navigated the treacherous depths. "Almost there," Marcus called out, his eyes focused ahead. "We're approaching a narrow escape route. If we can make it through, we might lose them." "Let's do it," Elara urged, willing them to succeed. The Spectre darted toward the narrow opening, the water swirling around them as they accelerated. The Cathar were hot on their heels, their pursuit relentless. Just as they entered the narrow passage, Elara felt a rush of exhilaration. "Keep it steady, we can make it." The submersible squeezed through the tight confines, the walls of the trench brushing against their hull. Elara held her breath as they emerged into a wider expanse, the darkness of the trench giving way to the deeper ocean below. "Hold on," Marcus shouted, adjusting their trajectory. "We need to drop down into the deeper currents." The Spectre plummeted into the depths, the pressure increasing as they descended. The Cathar ships hesitated at the entrance of the trench, their sensors unable to follow them into the abyss. "Did we lose them?" Elara asked, breathless with anticipation. Marcus took a moment to check the systems, then nodded. "For now, yes, but we need to keep moving. We can't risk stopping until we're far from their territory." As they continued to dive deeper, the darkness enveloped them, but Elara felt a surge of hope. They had gathered critical intel on the Cathar plans, and they had survived. They just needed to return to the Valor and relay their findings. "Prepare the data for transmission," Elara instructed, turning to the Tihari. We need to inform the crew and strategize our next move. The depths of the ocean were eerily quiet as the Spectre glided through the dark waters, the adrenaline from their narrow escape slowly fading. Ilara leaned back in her seat, catching her breath, her mind racing with the implications of their findings. They had narrowly avoided capture, but now the weight of their mission pressed heavily upon her. "Status report," she said, glancing at Marcus, who was busy managing the submersible systems. "Energy levels are stable, but we need to be careful about the power drain," he replied, furrowing his brow. "We'll have to surface soon to recharge." Ilara nodded, then turned to the HFY diver. "How's the data transmission coming along?" "We are ready to send the information," the HFY replied, its glow pulsing rhythmically. "But we must ensure we're at a safe distance from Cathar territory first. Their patrols are still active." "Let's navigate away from the trench then," Ilara said, her resolve strengthening. "We can make the transmission once we're in open waters." Marcus adjusted their course, guiding the Spectre upward toward the surface. The tension in the cockpit slowly began to dissipate, but the reality of what lay ahead loomed in the back of Ilara's mind. After a few moments, the submersible broke through the surface of the ocean, the sun's rays piercing the water and light the cockpit. Ilara exhaled a sigh of relief, momentarily grateful for the light and warmth. "Keep an eye out for any ships," she instructed, peering out the viewport. "We don't want to attract any unwanted attention." As they floated on the surface, the HFY diver began to establish a secure link to the Valor. "Data transmission commencing now," it said, its glow intensifying. Marcus monitored the readings. "It'll take a few minutes to send everything. Let's hope they're ready to receive us." "Considering what we just experienced, I'd say they'll be on high alert," Ilara replied. She felt the tension in her muscles ease as they waited, but the thought of the Cathar raid gnawed at her. "We have to act quickly once we're back on the Valor. We can't let them hit that settlement." Minutes passed, the silence broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. Just as the transmission completed, the HFY diver's glow shifted to a vibrant blue. "The transmission has been received. We are now linked with the Valor." "Excellent," Ilara said, a sense of urgency returning. "Let's get back. We need to regroup and plan our next move." "Setting course for the Valor," Marcus announced, activating the engines. The Spectre surged forward, slicing through the water as they made their way back to the flagship. Upon arrival at the Valor, Ilara felt a rush of relief as they docked the Spectre in the launch bay. The crew was already in motion, and as she and Marcus disembarked, Ilara could see the concern etched on their faces. "Captain," a crew member called out, rushing forward. "We received your transmission. The Cathar are indeed planning an attack. The settlement is on high alert." "Good," Ilara said, her tone firm. "We need to fortify their defenses and prepare for any potential skirmishes. Gather the crew for an immediate briefing in the war room." As the crew filed into the war room, Ilara felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on her. She stepped to the front, ready to share what they had learned. "Thank you all for gathering on such short notice," Ilara began, looking around at the determined faces of her crew. "As many of you know, Marcus, the HFY, and I conducted a reconnaissance mission into Cathar territory. We have gathered critical intel regarding their upcoming plans." She gestured to Marcus, who activated the holographic display. A map of the ocean floor appeared, dotted with the locations of Cathar activity. "The Cathar are planning a large-scale raid on a nearby settlement," Marcus explained, pointing to a cluster of red dots on the map. "We believe they intend to strike within the next cycle, and if we don't act quickly, they could cause significant damage." Ilara continued, "Our goal is to warn the settlement and coordinate a defense. We also need to prepare our own ship for any potential counterattacks. I want all available personnel to be on standby." The murmurs among the crew grew louder as they processed the information. Ilara raised her hand to regain their attention. "We will not allow the Cathar to catch us off guard. We'll deploy drones to the settlement to reinforce their defenses and establish a communication link for updates. We need to know the moment they move, she declared. A crew member, Lieutenant Cade, spoke up. What about our forces? Should we prepare for an offensive against the Cathar stronghold? Elara considered the question, her mind racing with possibilities. We need to assess our resources before launching an offensive. If we strike too soon, we risk exposing ourselves. Our priority is to protect the settlement and gather more intel. The Tihari diver interjected, its glow flickering with urgency. If we can create a diversion at the Cathar base, it may draw their forces away from the settlement. This could provide the residents with the time they need to prepare. Alara's mind sparked with the idea. That's a solid plan. If we can hit their supply routes or sabotage their operations, it will slow down their attack and give us the upper hand. Marcus, can we deploy a team to execute this? Marcus nodded, a fire igniting in his eyes. Absolutely. We can use the Spectre again to infiltrate their territory. The Tihari can guide us to vulnerable points along their supply lines. Let's make it happen, Alara said, her resolve solidifying. We'll need a team of volunteers for the operation. I'll lead it myself. We can't allow fear to dictate our actions, we have to take the fight to them. A murmur of agreement swept through the room. Elara felt the energy shift, a sense of unity forming among the crew as they embraced the challenge ahead. Prepare for a briefing in 15 minutes, Elara instructed. Gather any necessary supplies and equipment for the mission. We'll move quickly. As the crew began to disperse, Elara felt a wave of determination wash over her. They were about to enter a battle against an enemy that had already proven to be ruthless and cunning, but she had faith in her crew and their newfound alliance with the Tihari. In the launch bay, Elara gathered her team, Marcus, the Tihari diver, and a small group of volunteers ready to embark on their daring mission. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, each member keenly aware of the stakes. All right, team, Elara said, addressing them with a steady voice. Our objective is to disrupt Cathar supply lines. We'll be stealthy and strategic, no unnecessary risks. Our priority is to gather intel and create distractions to draw their forces away from the settlement. The Tihari diver, now glowing a vibrant green, spoke up. I will guide you through the depths, helping you evade Cathar patrols. We must work in harmony. Let's make sure we're equipped for every scenario, Marcus added. We'll need drones for reconnaissance and a few explosive devices to create diversions. We can rig them to detonate from a distance. Elara nodded, appreciating Marcus's tactical approach. Exactly. We'll deploy the drones first to gather intel on their operations before we move in. Keep your communication devices active. We need to stay coordinated. As they loaded the Spectre, Elara's mind raced with thoughts of the impending conflict. She could not shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something significant, an opportunity to change the tide in their favor. Ready to go, Captain? Marcus asked, adjusting his gear as he climbed into the submersible. Let's do this, Elara replied, a fierce determination igniting within her. The Spectre submerged once again, gliding smoothly through the water as they navigated toward the Cathar stronghold. With the Tihari divers' guidance, they moved swiftly and silently, avoiding patrols and treacherous terrain. As they approached their target, Elara could see the outlines of Cathar vessels patrolling the area. They were positioned strategically, ensuring that any attempt to breach their defenses would be met with immediate retaliation. Deploying drones, Marcus announced, focusing on his controls. The drones whirred to life, slipping quietly into the water and disappearing from view. Maintain a safe distance while the drones gather data, Elara instructed, her eyes scanning the area. We need to know their supply routes and any potential vulnerabilities. Minutes stretched into an eternity as they awaited the drone's return. Tension filled the cockpit, each crew member focused and ready for action. Suddenly, a feed flickered to life on the main display, revealing a live feed from the drones. Cathar vessels were busily moving supplies, and Alara's heart raced as she observed their operations. Their supply chain is extensive, Marcus reported, studying the display. If we disrupt this, we could significantly slow down their attack. Alara leaned closer to the display, her heart pounding as the drone's feed revealed the intricate web of Cathar operations. Vessels loaded with supplies were being unloaded at a staging area, guarded by sentries that moved with a predatory grace. The strategic layout of their defenses was glaringly apparent. "Those supply lines are our target," Alara said, determination surging through her. "If we can disrupt their flow of resources, we might buy the settlement enough time to prepare for the upcoming raid." The HFY diver focused its energy, enhancing the clarity of the drone's feed. "There are multiple weak points along the perimeter. We can use these to our advantage." Marcus nodded, his fingers flying over the controls as he manipulated the data. "I can program the drones to create diversions at specific points. A few well-placed detonations should cause chaos and draw their attention." "Let's break their supply chain," Alara agreed. "We'll use stealth to get in close and then hit them hard and fast." With the plan set, the crew finalized their preparations. Alara felt the gravity of the moment settle over her, a mixture of excitement and trepidation. They were about to dive into the heart of enemy territory, and there was no turning back. "Ready to launch the diversion drones?" Marcus asked, glancing at Alara. "Let's do it," she replied, her voice steady. "And remember, we need to keep communication open at all times. If anything goes wrong, we need to regroup quickly." As the Spectre glided closer to the Cathar staging area, Alara felt the tension in the cockpit rise. The drone feeds provided a live view of the Cathar vessels, and she could see the guards, weapons at the ready, scanning their surroundings. "Deploying drones now," Marcus announced. The drones slipped into the water, moving with the grace of shadows. Alara watched the feed, her heart racing as the tiny machines approached the enemy stronghold. "Hold steady," she instructed, her eyes glued to the screen. The drones reached their designated positions, and Alara's anticipation peaked. "Activate the diversions." With a flick of a switch, Marcus activated the drones. The scene erupted into chaos as the drones released their charges, creating a series of explosions along the perimeter of the supply area. Bright flashes lit up the dark waters, light the Cathar vessels and sending guards scrambling. "Let's move," Alara shouted, adrenaline pumping through her veins. "We'll take advantage of the confusion." Marcus guided the Spectre toward the staging area, the crew bracing for action. As they closed in, Alara's eyes narrowed, scanning for any signs of danger. The Cathar were in disarray, their attention focused on the explosions. "Deploy the next wave of drones for reconnaissance," Alara ordered. "We need to gather as much intel as we can." The drones shot forward, capturing images and data from within the chaos. Alara's heart raced as she saw Cathar personnel scrambling to respond, their formations breaking apart in a desperate attempt to regain control. Suddenly, the HFY diver's glow flickered with urgency. "Cathar reinforcements are being dispatched. We must act quickly." "Time to hit them where it hurts," Alara said, steeling her resolve. "Let's move in for a closer look at their operations. We need to know what they're shipping and where they're storing it." As the Spectre maneuvered closer to the chaos, Alara felt a surge of determination. They had the advantage of surprise, and she was not about to let it slip away. "Marcus, prepare the torpedoes," she instructed. "We may need them if things escalate." "Ready when you are," he replied, his voice calm despite the intensity of the situation. The drones transmitted vital information, revealing the interior of the supply area. Crates marked with Cathar symbols were stacked high, and Alara quickly noted the locations of weaponry and supplies. "This is it," she said, a fire igniting within her. "This is the intel we need. If we can destroy these supplies, we can cripple their upcoming attack." As she surveyed the area, she felt the thrill of impending battle surge within her. "Let's take out their resources and then get out. We can't risk a prolonged engagement." "On it," Marcus replied, locking onto the targets. Ready to fire on your command. Alara took a deep breath, steadied by the moment. Fire! The torpedoes shot from the Spectre, streaking through the water and striking their targets with pinpoint accuracy. Explosions rocked the staging area, sending debris and Cathar personnel flying. Hit them hard, Alara shouted, feeling the adrenaline surge through her. Keep firing while we still have the element of surprise. As the Spectre unleashed its firepower, Alara's heart raced with a thrill of battle. The Cathar were caught off guard, their formations shattered by the explosions. Panic rippled through their ranks, and she could see the chaos unfold on the screens. Keep an eye on our flanks, Marcus warned. They'll be regrouping quickly. Redirect power to the shields, Alara ordered, her voice sharp. We need to protect ourselves from incoming fire. Just then, a series of Cathar ships broke away from their positions, accelerating toward the Spectre with weapons primed. Alara's pulse quickened as she realized they were mobilizing to retaliate. Reinforcements incoming, the Tihari shouted, its glow flickering. We need to move now. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, Alara commanded, adrenaline coursing through her. We can't stay here. Marcus swiftly adjusted their trajectory, the Spectre darting through the water as Cathar blast whizzed past. Alara gripped her seat, her heart racing as they navigated through the chaos, dodging enemy fire. We need to regroup and assess our damage, she shouted, glancing back at the Cathar vessels, which were gaining on them. Engaging cloak, Marcus replied, activating the submersible's stealth technology. The Spectre shimmered and blended into the surrounding water, making them harder to target. Let's move deeper into the trench, Alara suggested, her mind racing with possibilities. If we can hide among the rocky outcrops, we can plan our next strike. As they maneuvered into the deeper depths of the trench, Alara felt a mix of exhilaration and anxiety. They had achieved their primary objective, disrupting the Cathar supply chain, but the battle was far from over. Status report, Alara called out, glancing at the control panel. Shields holding, but we took some damage during the escape, Marcus said, his brow furrowed with concentration. We need to find a safe location to assess and make repairs. Agreed, Alara replied, her voice steady. Tihari, can you guide us to a secure spot? The Tihari diver's glow pulsed with intensity. Follow my lead. I know a hidden cavern nearby where we can regroup. As they followed the Tihari's directions, Alara felt a surge of determination. They had fought bravely and had gained valuable intelligence. The Cathar would not easily forget this disruption, and the settlement would need every advantage to prepare for the attack that was still looming. Minutes later, the Spectre nestled into the hidden cavern, the rocky walls shielding them from prying eyes. Alara felt a momentary sense of relief wash over her as they powered down the systems and began to assess the damage. Everyone, take a moment to breathe, she said, her voice calm. We need to regroup and plan our next move carefully. We've achieved a significant victory, but we still have more to do. Marcus and the Tihari diver began assessing the control panel, while the other crew members checked their gear and prepared for the next steps. Alara took a moment to gather her thoughts, knowing that their victory was only the beginning. Let's review the intel we gathered from the drones, Alara suggested, moving to the holographic display. The others gathered around her, ready to strategize. The display lit up, revealing images of the Cathar operations, as well as the locations of the supplies they had destroyed. Alara pointed to the highlighted areas. Based on our intel, these supply routes are critical to their operations, she explained. If we can strike again, we may be able to push them back significantly. The Cathar will likely retaliate, Marcus cautioned. We need to be prepared for their response. We can't afford to underestimate them again. I agree, Alara replied, her expression resolute. We'll need to fortify our defenses while preparing for another offensive. We should also consider how we can inform the settlement about the Cathar's plans and enlist their help. The Tihari diver's glow flickered with urgency. Time is of the essence. If we do not act swiftly, the Cathar may succeed in their plans. The atmosphere inside the cavern was thick with tension and urgency. Alara stood at the center of the makeshift command station, surrounded by her crew, the glow of holographic displays casting shifting shadows across their determined faces. She could feel the gravity of their mission pressing down on her, and the stakes had never been higher. "All right, team," Alara began, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in her mind. "We have two main objectives: gather intel for our next offensive and ensure the settlement is prepared for the Cathar attack. We need to act quickly and efficiently." Marcus leaned over the holographic display, scrolling through the data captured by their drones. "From what we've gathered, the Cathar are heavily reliant on these supply routes. If we can pinpoint the exact timing of their shipments, we can create a more effective strike." The Tihari diver, its light shifting from blue to green, added, "I can assist in identifying their patterns. The Cathar tend to follow predictable routes when transporting supplies. With my guidance, we can set up an ambush." "Perfect," Ilara replied, feeling a surge of optimism. "Let's analyze their movement patterns. If we can anticipate their next transport, we can intercept them before they reach the settlement." As they worked, Ilara felt the energy in the room shift, a palpable determination igniting among the crew. Each member focused intently on their tasks, fueled by the adrenaline of their recent victory and the urgency of what lay ahead. After several minutes of analysis, Marcus pointed to a series of coordinates on the map. "These supply routes align with their operational patterns. If we deploy a team here," he said, indicating a location near the Cathar stronghold, "we can hit them just as they're making their delivery." Alara nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "We'll need a small, agile team for this. They'll have to be able to move quickly and evade any patrols. I'll lead the mission again." "I want to come with you," Marcus said, determination in his eyes. "I know these systems better than anyone on the ship. If things go south, I can help us adapt." "Agreed," Ilara replied, appreciating Marcus's dedication. "We'll need your expertise. Let's also take the Tihari. Its knowledge of Cathar tactics will be invaluable." The Tihari diver nodded, its glow pulsing with anticipation. "I am ready to assist in whatever way I can." "All right, then it's settled," Ilara said, her voice firm. "We'll execute the strike on the supply route and create as much disruption as possible. Meanwhile, the rest of you will establish communication with the settlement and ensure they are fortified for the Cathar's impending attack." Lieutenant Cade raised his hand. "What if the Cathar retaliate while we're away? We can't leave the Valor vulnerable." Ilara considered this, her brow furrowing. "Good point. We'll need to leave a strong defensive team aboard the Valor to monitor any movements and ensure our defenses are fortified." "Count me in for the defensive team," Cade said, his expression resolute. "Great," Ilara replied, appreciating his readiness. "We'll coordinate our movements carefully. Communication will be key. Let's ensure everyone is aware of their roles." As they finalized the details of their plan, Ilara felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. They were on the verge of a critical strike against the Cathar, but the unpredictability of battle weighed heavily on her mind. Within the hour, the crew was ready to execute their plan. Ilara, Marcus, and the Tihari diver boarded the Spectre, which had been outfitted with new supplies and weapons. As the submersible submerged into the depths, the familiar hum of the engines resonated around them. Ilara glanced at Marcus, who was focused on the control panel. "You ready for this?" He met her gaze, determination shining in his eyes. "Absolutely. We've got this." The Tihari diver floated nearby, its form shimmering in the dim light. "The Cathar will not expect us to strike again so soon. We have the advantage of surprise." "Let's make it count," Ilara replied, gripping the console as the Spectre sliced through the water, heading toward their target. As they approached the supply route, tension filled the cockpit. Ilara could see the outlines of Cathar vessels patrolling the area. Her pulse quickened, the thrill of the hunt igniting her spirit. "Stealth mode engaged," Marcus said, his fingers dancing over the controls. The Spectre shimmered as it blended into the surrounding waters, becoming nearly invisible to the Cathar patrols. "Keep a close eye on their movements," Alara instructed, her focus sharp. "We need to time this perfectly." Moments later, the drones began transmitting live feeds, revealing the Cathar vessels transporting supplies through the dark waters. Alara's heart raced as she watched the activity unfold on the screens. "There they are," Marcus said, pointing to a cluster of Cathar vessels moving in formation. "They're approaching the drop-off point." "Prepare the drones for deployment," Alara commanded, her voice steady. "We'll create distractions to draw their attention while we strike the main supply vessel." As Marcus activated the drones, Alara felt a surge of adrenaline. The Spectre lurked in the shadows, ready to pounce at the right moment. She could see the Cathar vessels growing closer, their movements synchronized and confident. "Drones deployed," Marcus announced, the screens displaying the drones as they zipped toward the Cathar formations. "Now we wait for the right moment." The tension in the cockpit was palpable as they watched the drones initiate their diversion. Explosions erupted near the Cathar vessels, sending shockwaves through their ranks. Chaos ensued as the Cathar personnel scrambled to respond, their formations breaking apart in confusion. "Now's our chance," Alara shouted, adrenaline surging through her. "Move in close to the supply vessel." Marcus maneuvered the Spectre into position, and Alara could feel the anticipation building. They had to hit hard and fast to maximize the chaos they'd created. "Lock onto the supply vessel," she commanded, her heart pounding. "Prepare to fire." "Locked on," Marcus replied, his focus unwavering. "Ready when you are." "Fire!" Alara shouted, and the torpedoes shot from the Spectre, striking the supply vessel with devastating precision. The explosion rocked the water, sending debris flying in all directions. Cathar personnel were thrown off balance, their shouts of confusion echoing through the chaos. "Let's keep the pressure on," Alara yelled, her voice filled with excitement. "Target the nearest Cathar ships. We can't let them regroup." Marcus quickly recalibrated their aim, launching a new wave of torpedoes. As they struck the nearby vessels, the chaos escalated, and Alara reveled in the victory. "Keep pushing," she urged, feeling the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "We can disrupt their entire operation." The Tihari diver's glow pulsed with energy, its voice steady despite the chaos. "We must remain cautious. Reinforcements will be dispatched soon. We cannot linger." "Understood," Alara replied, her heart racing. "We'll make one more strike and then regroup." As the Spectre unleashed its firepower, Alara felt a surge of triumph. They were gaining ground, disrupting the Cathar supply chain effectively. The enemy was reeling from their assault, and she could sense their growing desperation. "Reinforcements approaching," Marcus shouted, his eyes widening as he scanned the radar. "We need to pull back now." "Time to retreat," Alara commanded, adrenaline pumping through her. "Let's regroup and get out of here." As they maneuvered away from the chaos, Alara couldn't help but feel a sense of exhilaration. They had struck a significant blow against the Cathar, and while danger still loomed, they had proven their resolve. Once they were safely hidden in the cavern, Alara gathered the crew to assess the results of their mission. The atmosphere was electric, a mixture of relief and triumph washing over them. "Great job, everyone," Alara began, her voice steady. "We executed our plan successfully, and we disrupted the Cathar supply lines significantly. Our intel indicates they'll be scrambling to recover." Marcus nodded, a grin on his face. "We caught them off guard, and they won't forget it anytime soon." The Tihari diver glowed brighter, its excitement palpable. "This victory will strengthen our alliance and give the settlement time to prepare." "Now, we need to regroup and prepare for the next steps," Alara said, her mind racing with possibilities. "We must inform the settlement of our success and ensure they're ready for any Cathar retaliation." Cade, who had remained on the Valor, contacted them via the communication link. "Captain, We've established contact with the settlement. They're prepared to reinforce their defenses, but they need more information about the Cathar's movements. Good, Elara replied. We'll provide them with everything we've gathered. We need to ensure they're ready for the Cathar's next move. The air inside the cavern buzzed with renewed energy as Elara and her crew regrouped. Their recent success against the Cathar had galvanized them, but Elara knew that the real test was still to come. The Cathar would not take their losses lightly. Retaliation was inevitable. Let's prepare the data for the settlement, Elara said, focusing on the task at hand. We need to outline our findings, including the supply routes we've identified and the current state of Cathar operations. Marcus nodded, already tapping into the ship's systems to compile the information. We have enough intel to provide them with a clear picture. If they can fortify their defenses and prepare for our next strike, we'll have a better chance of turning the tide. The Tihari diver floated nearby, its glow shifting to a contemplative hue. We must also consider the psychological impact of our actions. The Cathar will be more cautious now, but they may also become desperate. Elara turned to face the Tihari. What do you suggest? Should we anticipate a full-scale assault? Perhaps, the Tihari replied. If we can predict their movements and understand their mindset, we may be able to counter their next move effectively. I can help analyze their typical tactics. Good idea, Elara said. While Marcus compiles the data for the settlement, let's review the Cathar's previous patterns. We need to be 2 steps ahead. As Marcus worked on the data, Elara and the Tihari began their analysis. Elara recalled the various skirmishes they'd faced against the Cathar, the way they operated as a cohesive unit. The Cathar were relentless, driven by a fierce loyalty to their cause. Look at this, Elara said, pointing to a pattern on the holographic display. They tend to launch coordinated attacks, using feints to mislead their opponents before striking at vulnerable points. We should expect something similar if they retaliate. Indeed, the Tihari agreed. If they believe they've identified our weaknesses, they will exploit them. We must be prepared to defend against both direct assaults and diversionary tactics. Marcus finished compiling the data and turned to Elara. I've packaged the intel for the settlement. It's ready to send as soon as we establish a secure channel. Let's do it, Elara said. We need to inform them of our success and prepare them for what's coming. As Marcus initiated the communication link, Elara felt a knot of anxiety form in her stomach. The stakes had risen significantly. Their success was a double-edged sword. If the Cathar retaliated fiercely, the settlement might face devastating consequences. Connection established, Marcus announced, his expression serious. They're ready to receive the intel. Go ahead, Elara instructed, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The screen flickered, and a familiar face appeared. Commander Lyra, the leader of the settlement's defense forces. Her expression was a mix of gratitude and concern. Captain Elara, Lyra said, her voice steady. We received your last transmission, and I can't thank you enough for the intel you've provided. However, I sense there's more to discuss. Elara nodded, her heart racing. We've successfully disrupted a significant portion of the Cathar supply lines, but they will retaliate. We need to prepare for an impending attack, and I want to share our analysis of their typical tactics. Understood, Lyra replied, her eyes narrowing as she processed the information. We'll need to bolster our defenses and ensure our fighters are ready for anything. Elara felt a surge of hope. We can provide tactical support from the Valor as well. We'll coordinate our movements to ensure we're in sync. Agreed, Lyra said, her determination evident. We'll mobilize our forces and establish a fortified perimeter, but we need to know when the Cathar will strike. Elara glanced at Marcus, who was ready with the intel. We believe they will launch a coordinated attack similar to their previous tactics. We can provide real-time updates based on our observations. Lyra nodded, her expression firm. Then we'll establish a secure communication channel for ongoing intel. We must stay connected. As they finalized their plans, Elara felt a sense of unity forming between their two teams. They were no longer just separate factions. They were allies in a shared fight for survival. After the communication ended, Elara turned to her crew, determination etched on her face. Now that we've established communication with the settlement, we need to prepare for the worst. Let's strengthen our defenses and ensure we can respond quickly to any Cathar movements. Marcus nodded. I'll run diagnostics on the Valor systems and make sure everything is operational. We can't afford any downtime. Good, Elara replied. And I want you to analyze any patterns in Cathar communication as well. If we can intercept their messages, it might give us an edge. The Tihari diver's glow brightened. I will assist in monitoring their signals. If we can decode any of their plans, it will provide invaluable insight. As they split up to tackle their respective tasks, Elara felt a renewed sense of purpose. She moved to the ship's command center, her mind racing with strategies and potential scenarios. They were in the eye of the storm, and she needed to be prepared for what lay ahead. Hours passed, and the atmosphere inside the cavern shifted as the crew worked tirelessly to prepare for the impending conflict. The holographic displays flickered with information, showcasing the Cathar's movements and the settlement's defenses. Elara gathered the crew for a strategy meeting. All right, everyone, let's regroup and discuss our findings. We need to ensure everyone is on the same page before the Cathar make their move. Marcus took the lead, presenting the data they had compiled. We've identified several key Cathar movements and their likely routes. Based on our analysis, we predict they'll launch their attack from multiple angles, attempting to overwhelm us. Cade leaned forward, concern etched on his face. We can't let them surround us. We need to establish defensive positions that will allow us to repel their advances. The Tihari diver added, using our knowledge of their tactics, we can set traps and ambush points along the likely routes of their advance. They won't expect us to be ready. Elara nodded, appreciating their insights. Let's draw up a defensive map. We need to identify strong points for our forces and set up communication lines to relay intel as the battle unfolds. As they worked on the map, the tension in the room escalated. Each member of the crew knew the risks they faced, but they were committed to their mission. They had come too far to back down now. Remember, our goal is to protect the settlement and disrupt the Cathar's plans, Elara reminded them. We fight for our survival and for the future of our people. The atmosphere grew electric with determination as they finalized their strategy. They mapped out positions, designated roles, and established communication protocols for the impending battle. As night fell in the cavern, the crew settled into their roles, ready for whatever the Cathar had in store. Elara took a moment to step outside the specter, gazing into the vast darkness of the ocean. The water shimmered under the faint glow of biolite organisms, casting an otherworldly light around her. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of leadership settle on her shoulders. This battle was not just about them. It was about the lives of those in the settlement, the people who had put their trust in her and her crew. She had to be strong for them. The Tihari diver glided beside her, its glow pulsating softly. You carry the burden of leadership well, Elara. The weight of our mission is not lost on you. Elara glanced at the Tihari, grateful for its presence. It's hard not to feel the pressure. So many lives depend on us. We fight not just for survival, but for hope, the Tihari replied, its voice soothing. Remember that the strength of our unity is a powerful weapon against our enemies. Thank you, Elara said, her heart lifting slightly. I'll keep that in mind. As they returned to the ship, the crew gathered for one final briefing before the battle. Elara looked around at the faces of her team, each one a testament to their resilience and dedication. All right, everyone, she began, her voice steady. We've prepared as best we can. Remember, the Cathar will come at us with everything they have. Stay sharp, communicate clearly, and trust one another. We're stronger together. A chorus of affirmations echoed through the chamber, bolstering Elara's spirit. They were ready to face the storm. The next morning, as dawn broke over the horizon, the atmosphere shifted. The crew stood at their posts, alert and ready, eyes scanning the waters for any sign of the Cathar. Alara's heart raced as she waited for the first signs of the impending attack. "Radar is picking up multiple Cathar vessels approaching," Marcus announced, his voice filled with urgency. "They're moving fast." "Here we go," Alara said, adrenaline surging through her veins. "Everyone, to your positions. Maintain communication." The tension in the air was thick as Alara and her crew prepared for the inevitable clash with the Cathar. The rhythmic beeping of the radar system underscored the urgency of the moment. Alara took a deep breath, centering herself as she locked eyes with her crew. "Status report, Marcus," Alara called, her voice steady despite the anticipation coursing through her. 3 Cathar vessels on a direct approach, approximately 3 clicks out," Marcus replied, his fingers dancing over the control panel. "Their moving in formation looks like they're planning a coordinated strike." Alara's mind raced as she processed the information. "What's the status of our defenses?" "Defensive positions are set," Cade announced from his station. "We're ready to respond at a moment's notice. The settlement has activated their shields and positioned their fighters." "Good," Alara said, her voice firm. "Remember, our priority is to protect the settlement at all costs. We need to draw them away from the vulnerable points." The Tihari diver floated nearby, its glow pulsating with intensity. "I can use my abilities to create diversions. If we can disrupt their communications, we may sow confusion among their ranks." "Do it," Alara commanded. "We need every advantage we can get." As the Cathar vessels drew closer, Alara felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This was what they had prepared for, a chance to stand against their enemies and fight for their survival. "Launch the drones," she shouted, adrenaline pumping through her veins. "We need eyes on the enemy." Marcus activated the drones, sending them out into the water to scout the incoming Cathar formations. The holographic displays flickered to life, showcasing real-time feeds of the Cathar vessels as they approached. "Look at their formation," Marcus said, zooming in on the display. "They're keeping tight ranks, probably to maximize their firepower. They think they can overwhelm us with sheer force." Alara nodded, formulating a plan in her mind. "We'll use their confidence against them. Tihari, can you create a distraction to draw one of their vessels away from the formation?" "Leave it to me," the Tihari replied, its voice calm and steady. With a graceful motion, the Tihari diver projected a holographic image of a phantom ship, glowing brightly as it shimmered in the water. The Cathar vessels reacted immediately, redirecting one of their ships toward the illusion. "Now," Alara shouted, seizing the opportunity, "let's exploit their distraction." As the drones engaged with the nearest Cathar vessel, Alara felt a surge of determination. The battle was upon them, and there was no turning back. The Cathar vessel that had been diverted turned sharply, its crew frantically trying to regain control. The drones unleashed their payload, striking the hull with precision. The explosion rocked the water, sending shockwaves through the surrounding area. "Direct hit," Marcus cheered, a hint of triumph in his voice. "Keep the pressure on," Alara urged. "We can't let them regroup. Prepare to engage the remaining vessels." The Cathar ships responded quickly, their weapon systems lighting up as they targeted the Valor and the settlement. Alara could see the beams of energy slicing through the water, the sheer force of their assault evident. "Shields up," Cade commanded, and Alara felt the familiar hum of energy envelop the ship as the protective barrier activated. "Return fire," Alara shouted. "Target their weapon systems, disarm them before they can launch a full assault." The Valor's weaponry came to life, unleashing a torrent of firepower at the Cathar vessels. Explosions erupted in the water, the sound reverberating through the ship. Alara watched as one of the Cathar ships began to list, smoke billowing from its hull. "Good shot," Marcus exclaimed. "They're starting to lose coordination." Alara's heart raced as she saw the Cathar ship struggling to maintain its formation. "Keep it up. We need to push them back before they regroup." The remaining Cathar vessels began to spread out, trying to flank the Valor. Ilara knew they were adapting, shifting tactics in response to their losses. "Marcus, can we get a drone in close to assess their communications?" Ilara asked, her mind racing. "If we can intercept their orders, we can disrupt their plans even further." "Working on it," he replied, his eyes locked on the displays. "I'll send a drone to get as close as possible." As Marcus deployed the drone, Ilara felt the tension in the air. She could see the Cathar crews scrambling, their movements frantic as they tried to regain control of the situation. "Here we go," Marcus said, his voice low. "I'm tapping into their communication feed." The holographic display flickered as the drone captured the Cathar's orders, the garbled voices of their commanders crackling through the speakers. "Retreat is not an option," a Cathar commander shouted, the desperation in his voice evident. "We must maintain formation and press the attack. They will falter." Ilara's resolve hardened as she listened to the Cathar's determination. "They're refusing to back down," she said, glancing at Cade. "They're willing to fight to the last." "Then we'll make sure that last comes soon," Cade replied, his expression fierce. The Tihari diver chimed in. "If we can sow doubt among their ranks, it may cause a rift in their formation. We need to act quickly." "Let's do it," Ilara said, adrenaline surging through her veins. "Tihari, can you project an image of a larger fleet? If we can make them believe reinforcements are coming, it might cause panic." "Consider it done," the Tihari replied, its light brightening as it projected a holographic fleet of ships advancing from the depths. As the Cathar vessels spotted the Phantom fleet, confusion spread through their ranks. Ilara watched as their formation began to waver, the Cathar struggling to maintain cohesion. "Now's our chance," Ilara shouted. "Target the ships that are breaking away. We can capitalize on this moment of uncertainty." The crew sprang into action, firing upon the Cathar vessels that had begun to retreat from their formation. Explosions erupted as shots found their mark, sending debris scattering through the water. "Keep up the pressure," Ilara urged, her heart racing. "We can turn the tide of this battle." The Cathar were beginning to falter. Ilara could see the signs of confusion spreading among their ranks. As one ship began to break away, the rest hesitated, caught between the desire to regroup and the fear of losing their advantage. "Marcus, keep monitoring their communications," Ilara said, her focus unwavering. "If they're second-guessing themselves, we can exploit that." "Already on it," Marcus replied, his fingers flying over the controls. "I'm picking up more chatter. They're arguing about whether to continue the assault or withdraw." "Let's fan the flames of that doubt," Ilara said, her mind racing with possibilities. "If we can make them believe they're outnumbered, they might retreat entirely." The Tihari diver moved closer, its glow light the cockpit. "I can amplify the holographic projection of our fleet. If they see a larger force, it may convince them to abandon the fight." "Do it," Ilara commanded, her heart pounding. "Let's show them what we're made of." As the Tihari projected the enlarged fleet, Ilara watched the Cathar vessels react in real time. She could see their formations begin to shift, some ships hesitating while others turned to flee. "Look!" Marcus shouted, pointing at the display. "They're breaking ranks." The sight fueled Ilara's determination. "We can't let them regroup. Engage with full force. Focus on the ones that are trying to escape." The Valor unleashed a barrage of fire, targeting the Cathar ships that had strayed from their formation. Explosions lit up the water, sending clouds of debris swirling in every direction. Ilara felt a rush of adrenaline as she witnessed their success. The Cathar vessels were no longer a unified front. They were scattered, disorganized, and vulnerable. "Push forward," Ilara commanded. "We can't let them recover." As the crew fought with renewed vigor, the Cathar were forced into retreat. Ilara could see the panic spreading among their ranks, the once cohesive formation crumbling under the pressure. "Status report," Ilara shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "3 Cathar vessels are attempting to withdraw," Marcus reported, excitement bubbling in his tone. The remaining ships are losing morale. Let's capitalize on their fear, Elara said, her determination unwavering. We'll pursue them and ensure they don't escape. As the Valor moved in to chase down the fleeing Cathar vessels, Elara felt a surge of triumph. They had turned the tide of the battle, and victory was within reach. The Cathar vessels flailed in their attempt to retreat, but Elara was relentless. The Valor surged through the water, its engines roaring, driven by the collective determination of the crew. The sight of the disheartened Cathar ships stirred something fierce within her, a mix of anger for the suffering they had caused and hope for the future they were fighting for. Focus fire on the lead ship, Elara commanded, her heart racing as she watched the enemy struggle to regroup. We can take them down before they can escape. Marcus's fingers flew over the controls, his eyes alight with excitement. Aye, Captain, targeting their engines now. As the Valor steadied itself, beams of energy shot forth, striking the lead Cathar vessel. The explosion lit the water, sending shockwaves through the surrounding area. The ship listed to one side, smoke billowing from its damaged hull. Direct hit, Cade shouted, grinning at the display. They won't be going anywhere. Elara felt a surge of exhilaration, but she tempered her excitement. Don't get overconfident. They'll fight back. Maintain your positions and keep an eye on the remaining ships. As if on cue, the other Cathar vessels returned fire, their energy beams slicing through the water toward the Valor. Elara felt the impact shudder through the hull, but the shields held firm. Shields at 75%, Marcus reported, glancing at the diagnostics. We can take a few more hits, but we need to end this quickly. Agreed, Elara said, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the Cathar's movements. Let's not give them a chance to regroup. Tihari, how is that projection working? Excellent, the Tihari replied, its glow pulsating with intensity. I can maintain the illusion of our larger fleet while also creating smaller distractions to keep them off balance. Perfect, Elara said. Let's do both. Create diversions on their flanks while we target the lead ship again. The Tihari diver concentrated, projecting holographic images of phantom ships darting through the water. The Cathar vessels flinched, their crews visibly shaken by the sudden appearances. Now's our chance, Elara shouted. Engage with full power. The Valor unleashed another volley, targeting the lead ship once more. The energy beams struck true, igniting the vessel in a brilliant explosion. Elara felt a rush of triumph as she watched it succumb to the fury of their assault. Two down, Cade exclaimed, pumping his fist. They're breaking apart. Keep pushing. We can't let them recover, Elara commanded, her focus unwavering. She glanced at the remaining Cathar ships, which were now losing coordination. Their once solid formation was crumbling under the weight of fear and confusion. Target the next ship, Marcus called, already locking on to the nearest Cathar vessel. They're trying to regroup, but they're vulnerable. Fire, Elara commanded, her heart racing as the Valor unleashed its power. The energy beams shot forth, striking the Cathar ship with devastating accuracy. The explosion rocked the water, sending debris scattering in every direction. Another one down, Cade cheered, adrenaline surging through him. As the chaos unfolded, Elara felt a sense of exhilaration mixed with caution. The Cathar were faltering, but desperation could lead them to act unpredictably. They needed to stay vigilant. Stay alert. They may try to launch a last-ditch effort, Elara warned. Let's not underestimate them. Just as she spoke, the remaining Cathar ship began to speed away, attempting to escape the battlefield. They're retreating, Cade shouted, his expression a mix of triumph and concern. Should we pursue? Yes, Elara replied, her eyes narrowing as she set her gaze on the fleeing ship. We can't let them warn their forces or regroup. As the Valor surged forward, Elara felt the weight of leadership heavy on her shoulders. They were not just fighting for their own survival. They were fighting to protect the settlement, to ensure that no more lives were lost to the Cathar's relentless pursuit. Marcus, can we get a lock on their engines? Elara asked, her voice steady despite the urgency of the situation. "Working on it," Marcus replied, his fingers deftly navigating the controls. "I'll have them in a moment." As the Cathar ship continued to flee, Alara could see its crew scrambling, trying to regain control of their situation. Panic was palpable, and she knew they had to capitalize on that. "Prepare to fire on my mark," Alara commanded, her heart racing as they closed the distance. "We need to disable their engines to ensure they can't escape." "Locking on now," Marcus said, his eyes glued to the readouts. "Just give the word." Alara's breath quickened as she counted down the moments. "Now, fire." The Valor unleashed a torrent of energy, striking the Cathar ship's engines with precision. The explosion sent a shockwave through the water, and Alara felt a surge of victory as the ship's speed diminished, smoke billowing from its damaged hull. "Yes," Cade shouted, pumping his fist in triumph. "We've got them." "Prepare for boarding," Alara commanded, her mind racing with the possibilities. "We need to gather intel and ensure they can't regroup." As the Valor approached the disabled Cathar ship, Alara's heart pounded with a mix of excitement and apprehension. This was their chance to gather valuable information, but it also meant facing whatever remained of the Cathar crew. "Marcus, can we scan for life signs?" Alara asked, her focus sharp. "We need to know what we're dealing with." "Scanning now," he replied, the control panel beeping with activity. "I'm detecting several life signs aboard, but they're weak, likely from injuries sustained during the battle." Alara felt a flicker of compassion. "Let's be careful. We don't want to underestimate them, even in their weakened state." As the Valor docked alongside the Cathar vessel, Alara led her crew in preparation for boarding. They suited up in their tactical gear, readying themselves for whatever awaited them. "Stay sharp," Alara reminded them, her voice firm. "We don't know what we'll encounter on the other side. Move in teams and maintain communication." As they boarded the Cathar ship, Alara felt a rush of adrenaline. The interior was dimly lit, the air thick with smoke and the scent of burning metal. The crew moved cautiously, scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. "Over here," Marcus whispered, pointing to a room at the end of the corridor. "Looks like the control room." Alara nodded, leading the way as they approached the door. With a swift motion, she pushed it open, her heart racing. Inside, the Cathar crew was scattered, some tending to their wounded, while others glared defiantly at the intruders. "Stand down," Alara commanded, raising her weapon. "We don't want to fight, but we will if we have to." A Cathar commander stepped forward, his expression a mix of defiance and pain. "You think you've won? This battle means nothing. We are a part of something greater." Alara narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean? What is your true goal here?" The commander hesitated, glancing at his crew. "We fight for the survival of our kind. We are more than just warriors. We are the vanguard of a new order." "An order that causes suffering and destruction?" Alara shot back. "You're killing innocent people." The commander straightened, his defiance unwavering. "In war, sacrifices must be made. Our cause transcends individual lives." Alara felt anger surge within her. "Your cause is built on the suffering of others. This cycle of violence needs to end." "Enough!" another Cathar crew member shouted, stepping forward. "We have nothing left to lose. If we go down, we'll take you with us." Alara's heart raced as she recognized the desperation in their voices. "We don't want to fight you. We want to find a way to stop this madness. Tell us what you know about your plans." The commander shook his head, his expression resolute. "You think you can change our destiny? You are naive." "Maybe," Alara replied, her voice steady. "But I refuse to accept that this is how it has to be. We can work together to find a solution. Help us, and we can end the cycle of violence." The room fell silent, the tension palpable as the Cathar crew exchanged uncertain glances. Alara could see doubt creeping into their eyes, and she pressed on. "Your leaders may have misled you, but you have a choice now. You can decide what happens next." The commander's expression wavered, and Elara seized the moment. "Help us understand your objectives. Share your intel, and we can find a way to stop the fighting." After a long pause, the commander finally spoke, his voice low. "If we surrender, we will face retribution from our superiors. But if we fight on, we may doom our people." The air in the control room of the Cathar ship was thick with tension, a standoff teetering on the brink of escalation. Elara held her breath, watching as the Cathar commander weighed the gravity of her offer. Around her, her crew stood poised, ready to react to whatever decision was made. "If we help you," the commander said slowly, his eyes narrowed, "what guarantees do we have that you will not turn on us once we've shared our knowledge?" Elara took a step closer, her voice firm but calm. "You have my word that if you choose to cooperate, you will be treated with respect and dignity. We're not your enemies. We're victims of this war, just like you. We want to end this cycle of violence." The commander hesitated, visibly torn between loyalty to his people and the desperation of their situation. "The orders we follow are absolute. To betray them would mean death." "And what about the death of innocents?" Elara pressed, her heart racing. "You've seen firsthand the destruction this war has caused. Think of your people, your families. Do you want to fight for a cause that brings nothing but suffering?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed the commander's face. "You don't understand our way of life. We fight to preserve our existence." "And you're fighting against those who wish to protect their own," Elara replied. "We're all trying to survive. Let's find a way to do it together." The Cathar crew murmured among themselves, a mix of fear and doubt evident in their eyes. The commander turned to them, his expression wavering. "What do you think? Can we trust them?" One of the younger crew members stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Commander, we're losing everything. Maybe it's time to consider a different path." Elara sensed the tide beginning to shift. "It is not too late to change your fate. Help us, and we can prevent more bloodshed. You can turn your back on a system that has brought you nothing but despair." The commander's shoulders slumped as he weighed the burden of leadership against the cries of his crew. "Very well," he said at last, his voice heavy. "We will share what we know. But know this, our survival is still at stake. If you betray us, we will not go down without a fight." "I wouldn't expect anything less," Elara replied, relief flooding through her. "We're on the same side now." With the Cathar crew's cooperation established, Elara and her team worked swiftly to gather intel. The Cathar commander led them to a makeshift war room at the rear of the ship, where holographic displays flickered with information about their fleet movements and battle strategies. "Here," the commander said, gesturing to a series of maps and schematics. "This shows our planned offensives against your settlements. We intended to target vulnerable areas, ones that would maximize chaos and disruption." Elara studied the maps, her heart sinking at the sight of their cruel precision. "You've planned attacks on civilian areas?" "It was deemed necessary for our survival," the commander replied, a trace of regret in his voice. "But it's clear now that this will lead only to mutual destruction." Marcus leaned closer, his eyes scanning the displays. "If we can decipher their communications and intercept their plans, we could turn the tide in our favor." Elara nodded. "And if we can establish a ceasefire, we may be able to broker peace with their higher command." The commander's brow furrowed. "Peace? You think they will accept this? They see weakness as a sign to exploit." "Maybe," Elara replied, determination igniting within her. "But if we can gather enough support from within your ranks, it might just tip the balance." As they worked together, Elara felt a sense of unity beginning to form. The Cathar crew, once seen as adversaries, were now allies in a common cause. They shared stories of loss and fear, their shared humanity bridging the chasm that had once separated them. Hours passed as they sifted through data, piecing together strategies and plans. Elara felt a newfound sense of hope as they formulated a plan to send a message to the Cathar leadership. If they could demonstrate the futility of their current approach, perhaps they could negotiate a ceasefire. We need to be strategic about this, Elara said, her mind racing. We can't just approach them blindly. We need to show them that cooperation benefits everyone. The Cathar commander nodded, his expression contemplative. We can use our internal channels to relay the message. It may take time, but there are those among us who are weary of the war. If we can reach them, there may be hope. Elara felt a surge of energy at the prospect. Let's do it. We'll draft a message that emphasizes our shared goals and the possibility of peace. As the Cathar crew worked alongside Elara's team, their synergy grew. They shared strategies, insights, and resources, blending their knowledge in a way that transformed the atmosphere from one of hostility to collaboration. Done, Marcus announced after several tense hours. We've crafted a message that outlines our intentions and requests a meeting with their leaders. It highlights the benefits of peace and our willingness to cooperate. Good work, Elara replied, her heart pounding. Let's send it out. The sooner we act, the better. The commander initiated the transmission, sending their message through encrypted channels. As they waited for a response, a heavy silence fell over the room, each person aware of the weight of their actions. Now we wait, Elara said, trying to quell the anxiety rising within her. But I believe we've taken the first step toward something meaningful. Hours turned into days as they awaited a reply, the atmosphere tense, but filled with cautious hope. The Cathar crew worked tirelessly to fortify their ship, ensuring they would be ready to defend themselves if necessary. Finally, on the third day, a message arrived. The commander's gaze flicked to the screen, and he quickly translated the Cathar's response. They're willing to meet, he said, his voice a mix of disbelief and hope. They want to discuss our proposal. Elara felt a rush of triumph. This is it. We have a chance to change the course of this conflict. Where do we meet? Marcus asked, his excitement palpable. They propose a neutral location, near the abandoned outpost on the outer rim of the sector, the commander replied. It's a risky move, but it may be our only chance. Elara exchanged glances with her crew, gauging their reactions. We have to do it. This is our opportunity to turn this war around. Agreed, Cade said, determination shining in his eyes. Let's prepare for the meeting. As the Valor and the Cathar ship approached the designated location, Elara felt a mix of apprehension and anticipation. The abandoned outpost loomed in the distance, a crumbling structure left to the elements. It felt both eerie and hopeful, a symbol of what once was and what could be. Steady, everyone, Elara said, her voice steady. We don't know what to expect from this meeting, but we must approach it with an open mind and a united front. As they docked at the outpost, Elara and her team disembarked, flanked by the Cathar crew. The air was thick with tension as they approached the designated meeting area, a dilapidated chamber filled with remnants of a long-abandoned civilization. The Cathar delegation arrived shortly after, their presence commanding yet cautious. The lead Cathar commander stepped forward, his expression inscrutable. Welcome, he said, his voice low. We've come to hear your proposal. Elara took a deep breath, steadying herself. Thank you for agreeing to meet. We understand the weight of the situation and the fears that drive this conflict. Our goal is simple, to end the violence and find a way to coexist peacefully. The Cathar commander nodded, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. You seek peace? Why should we trust you? Because we've both suffered too much, Elara replied, her heart racing. This war has cost us countless lives. We believe there's a better way, a way to secure our futures without further bloodshed. The room fell silent as the Cathar delegation exchanged glances. Elara pressed on, her voice steady. We've come together to share our insights and strategies, to show that cooperation can lead to a stronger future for both our peoples. If we can unite against those who wish to perpetuate this conflict, we can safeguard our homes. The Cathar commander regarded her with an intensity that made Elara's heart race. You speak of unity, but how can we trust that your people will not turn against us if we lower our defenses? Trust is earned, Elara replied, unwavering. But if we can establish a ceasefire and begin working together, we can build a foundation of trust. Our goal is not domination, but mutual respect and coexistence. As the Cathar delegation deliberated, Elara felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was their chance to alter the course of history, but it would require courage and a willingness to embrace change. The air in the control room of the Cathar ship was thick with tension, a standoff teetering on the brink of escalation. Elara held her breath, watching as the Cathar commander weighed the gravity of her offer. Around her, her crew stood poised, ready to react to whatever decision was made. "If we help you," the commander said slowly, his eyes narrowed, "what guarantees do we have that you will not turn on us once we've shared our knowledge?" Elara took a step closer, her voice firm but calm. "You have my word that if you choose to cooperate, you will be treated with respect and dignity. We're not your enemies, we're victims of this war, just like you. We want to end this cycle of violence." The commander hesitated, visibly torn between loyalty to his people and the desperation of their situation. "The orders we follow are absolute. To betray them would mean death." "And what about the death of innocents?" Elara pressed, her heart racing. "You've seen firsthand the destruction this war has caused. Think of your people, your families. Do you want to fight for a cause that brings nothing but suffering?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed the commander's face. "You don't understand our way of life. We fight to preserve our existence." "And you're fighting against those who wish to protect their own," Elara replied. "We're all trying to survive. Let's find a way to do it together." The Cathar crew murmured among themselves, a mix of fear and doubt evident in their eyes. The commander turned to them, his expression wavering. "What do you think? Can we trust them?" One of the younger crew members stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Commander, we're losing everything. Maybe it's time to consider a different path." Elara sensed the tide beginning to shift. "It is not too late to change your fate. Help us, and we can prevent more bloodshed. You can turn your back on a system that has brought you nothing but despair." The commander's shoulders slumped as he weighed the burden of leadership against the cries of his crew. "Very well," he said at last, his voice heavy. "We will share what we know. But know this, our survival is still at stake. If you betray us, we will not go down without a fight." "I wouldn't expect anything less," Elara replied, relief flooding through her. "We're on the same side now." With the Cathar crew's cooperation established, Elara and her team worked swiftly to gather intel. The Cathar commander led them to a makeshift war room at the rear of the ship, where holographic displays flickered with information about their fleet movements and battle strategies. "Here," the commander said, gesturing to a series of maps and schematics. "This shows our planned offensives against your settlements. We intended to target vulnerable areas, ones that would maximize chaos and disruption." Elara studied the maps, her heart sinking at the sight of their cruel precision. "You've planned attacks on civilian areas." "It was deemed necessary for our survival," the commander replied, a trace of regret in his voice. "But it's clear now that this will lead only to mutual destruction." Marcus leaned closer, his eyes scanning the displays. "If we can decipher their communications and intercept their plans, we could turn the tide in our favor." Elara nodded. "And if we can establish a ceasefire, we may be able to broker peace with their higher command." The commander's brow furrowed. "Peace? You think they will accept this? They see weakness as a sign to exploit." "Maybe," Elara replied, determination igniting within her. "But if we can gather enough support from within your ranks, it might just tip the balance." As they worked together, Elara felt a sense of unity beginning to form. The Cathar crew, once seen as adversaries, were now allies in a common cause. They shared stories of loss and fear, their shared humanity bridging the chasm that had once separated them. Hours passed as they sifted through data, piecing together strategies and plans. Elara felt a newfound sense of hope as they formulated a plan to send a message to the Cathar leadership. If they could demonstrate the futility of their current approach, Perhaps they could negotiate a ceasefire. We need to be strategic about this, Ilara said, her mind racing. We can't just approach them blindly. We need to show them that cooperation benefits everyone. The Cathar commander nodded, his expression contemplative. We can use our internal channels to relay the message. It may take time, but there are those among us who are weary of the war. If we can reach them, there may be hope. Ilara felt a surge of energy at the prospect. Let's do it. We'll draft a message that emphasizes our shared goals and the possibility of peace. As the Cathar crew worked alongside Ilara's team, their synergy grew. They shared strategies, insights, and resources, blending their knowledge in a way that transformed the atmosphere from one of hostility to collaboration. Done, Marcus announced after several tense hours. We've crafted a message that outlines our intentions and requests a meeting with their leaders. It highlights the benefits of peace and our willingness to cooperate. Good work, Ilara replied, her heart pounding. Let's send it out. The sooner we act, the better. The commander initiated the transmission, sending their message through encrypted channels. As they waited for a response, a heavy silence fell over the room, each person aware of the weight of their actions. Now we wait, Ilara said, trying to quell the anxiety rising within her. But I believe we've taken the first step towards something meaningful. Hours turned into days as they awaited a reply, the atmosphere tense but filled with cautious hope. The Cathar crew worked tirelessly to fortify their ship, ensuring they would be ready to defend themselves if necessary. Finally, on the third day, a message arrived. The commander's gaze flicked to the screen, and he quickly translated the Cathar's response. They're willing to meet, he said, his voice a mix of disbelief and hope. They want to discuss our proposal. Ilara felt a rush of triumph. This is it. We have a chance to change the course of this conflict. Where do we meet? Marcus asked, his excitement palpable. They propose a neutral location, near the abandoned outpost on the outer rim of the sector, the commander replied. It's a risky move, but it may be our only chance. Ilara exchanged glances with her crew, gauging their reactions. We have to do it. This is our opportunity to turn this war around. Agreed, Cade said, determination shining in his eyes. Let's prepare for the meeting. As the Valor and the Cathar ship approached the designated location, Ilara felt a mix of apprehension and anticipation. The abandoned outpost loomed in the distance, a crumbling structure left to the elements. It felt both eerie and hopeful, a symbol of what once was and what could be. Steady, everyone, Ilara said, her voice steady. We don't know what to expect from this meeting, but we must approach it with an open mind and a united front. As they docked at the outpost, Ilara and her team disembarked, flanked by the Cathar crew. The air was thick with tension as they approached the designated meeting area, a dilapidated chamber filled with remnants of a long-abandoned civilization. The Cathar delegation arrived shortly after, their presence commanding yet cautious. The lead Cathar commander stepped forward, his expression inscrutable. Welcome, he said, his voice low. We've come to hear your proposal. Ilara took a deep breath, steadying herself. Thank you for agreeing to meet. We understand the weight of the situation and the fears that drive this conflict. Our goal is simple, to end the violence and find a way to coexist peacefully. The Cathar commander nodded, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. You seek peace? Why should we trust you? Because we've both suffered too much, Ilara replied, her heart racing. This war has cost us countless lives. We believe there's a better way to secure our futures without further bloodshed. The room fell silent as the Cathar delegation exchanged glances. Ilara pressed on, her voice steady. We've come together to share our insights and strategies, to show that cooperation can lead to a stronger future for both our peoples. If we can unite against those who wish to perpetuate this conflict, we can safeguard our homes. The Cathar commander regarded her with an intensity that made Ilara's heart race. You speak of unity, but how can we trust that your people will not turn against us if we lower our defenses? Trust is earned, Elara replied, unwavering. But if we can establish a ceasefire and begin working together, we can build a foundation of trust. Our goal is not domination but mutual respect and coexistence. As the Cathar delegation deliberated, Elara felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was their chance to alter the course of history, but it would require courage and a willingness to embrace change. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Cathar commander spoke. "We will consider your proposal, but no." The tension in the room thickened as the Cathar commander's words hung in the air. Elara could see her crew exchanging hopeful glances, but she knew better than to let her heart race ahead of reason. Negotiating peace was never straightforward, especially after so much blood had been spilled. "Consideration is a start," Elara said, her voice steady. "But we need to act swiftly. Each moment we delay, more lives are at risk. Let's discuss the terms of a ceasefire and how we can begin working together." The Cathar commander nodded, his expression still cautious but thoughtful. "What do you propose?" "First, we need an immediate cessation of hostilities," Elara replied, her mind racing as she formulated their strategy. "This includes halting all attacks on civilian targets. Next, we can establish a joint task force to oversee the transition to peace." "Joint task force?" the commander echoed, skepticism creeping into his tone. "And who will lead this force?" Elara glanced at her team, then back at the Cathar leaders. "A representative from each side should lead together. This shows our commitment to collaboration and mutual respect." The commander stroked his chin thoughtfully, considering her words. "And what if one side does not adhere to the ceasefire? What safeguards will you put in place?" "We can create a monitoring system," Elara suggested. "Both parties can assign observers to ensure compliance. If violations occur, we can address them directly, rather than resorting to violence." The Cathar delegation exchanged glances, murmurs rippling through their ranks. The younger crew member from earlier leaned forward, his expression earnest. "This is different from what we've been told. We've only ever known a world of war and bloodshed. Can we really trust each other?" "Trust will take time, but this is a step," Elara replied, her heart pounding. "We have to start somewhere, and I believe our survival depends on it. We can protect our people without further violence." The commander finally nodded, albeit slowly. "Very well, I agree to a ceasefire and the establishment of a joint task force. But know this, should either side betray this accord, we will not hesitate to defend ourselves." Elara felt a surge of relief, but she remained focused. "Agreed. We must also establish communication lines between our forces to discuss any grievances and prevent misunderstandings." As they delved deeper into negotiations, Elara couldn't shake the feeling of cautious optimism. The Cathar were wary, yes, but they were also tired. Tired of fighting, tired of loss, just like her people. With the ceasefire established, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The Cathar crew that had once been hostile began working alongside Elara's team, their shared humanity blossoming amidst the ruins of conflict. They started by drafting a comprehensive agreement outlining the terms of their collaboration. Together, they formed committees focused on resource sharing, intelligence exchanges, and community rebuilding efforts. Elara felt a renewed sense of purpose as they met regularly to discuss their next steps. In the weeks that followed, she observed the Cathar crew grow more comfortable, their defenses slowly lowering as they began to trust their new allies. One evening, as they gathered in the control room, Elara noticed the Cathar commander engaging in a friendly discussion with Marcus and Cade. The atmosphere felt lighter, laughter breaking the tension that had once suffocated their interactions. "Things are looking up," Cade said, nudging Elara with a grin. "I never thought I'd see the day when a Cathar would share a drink with us without drawing weapons." Elara chuckled, her heart swelling at the sight. "It's amazing what can happen when you find common ground. We're making real progress." The commander approached, holding a flask of an unfamiliar liquid. "May I offer a toast?" he asked, his voice still formal but tinged with newfound warmth. Elara raised her own cup. "To new beginnings," she said, her voice steady, "and to the strength we find in unity." "To new beginnings," the others echoed, and they raised their cups in unison. The moment felt monumental, a sign of hope amidst the chaos. As the weeks turned into months, the joint task force began to take shape. They established a council that included representatives from both factions, working tirelessly to address the needs of their communities. The first significant challenge arose when reports surfaced of rogue Cathar factions attacking isolated settlements. The council convened urgently, the weight of their responsibility palpable. "We need to act quickly," Elara said, addressing the assembled members. "If we don't respond decisively, it could undermine everything we've built." One of the Cathar representatives, a seasoned warrior named Darren, spoke up. "We cannot allow these factions to disrupt our efforts. They see our ceasefire as weakness." "But we must approach this delicately," another member cautioned. "An aggressive response could escalate the situation. We need to find a way to negotiate with them." Elara considered their words, weighing the urgency against the need for caution. "What if we send a delegation to reach out to these rogue factions? We can offer them a chance to join us instead of fighting against us." Darren frowned, his expression one of doubt. "They may see our offer as a trap." "Then let's be transparent," Elara replied. "We can show them that we're united and committed to ending this war. If they truly wish to stop the fighting, they'll listen." The council deliberated, each member weighing the risks and potential outcomes. After an intense discussion, they reached a consensus to send a delegation, including both Cathar and human representatives, to negotiate with the rogue factions. Elara felt a sense of pride as they prepared for the mission, recognizing the bravery it took for both sides to step into the unknown together. As they departed, she reminded them of their shared goal. "Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for the future of our peoples. Show them that unity is stronger than division." The days that followed felt heavy with anticipation as they awaited news from the delegation. Elara spent her time coordinating with her crew, ensuring they remained vigilant in their duties. Every message received from scouts was scrutinized, and every shadow felt like a potential threat. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the delegation returned. Their expressions were weary but resolute. Elara rushed to greet them, her heart pounding. "What happened?" she asked, her voice barely containing her excitement. Darren stepped forward, his expression serious. "We managed to reach out to them. Some were receptive to our message, but others remained fiercely loyal to the war. We've invited them to join us for a council meeting, to discuss their grievances and explore the possibility of peace." Elara felt a mix of hope and concern. "That's a significant step forward, but we must be cautious. We can't afford to let our guard down." "Agreed," Darren said. "We need to ensure the safety of all involved. We can't allow any rogue elements to disrupt this process." As they prepared for the meeting with the rogue factions, Elara's mind raced. She knew that this was a turning point, a chance to potentially bring more people into the fold of peace. But it also carried the risk of violence, of betrayal. On the day of the council meeting, Elara stood at the forefront of the gathering, flanked by Darren and the other Cathar representatives. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as members from the rogue factions arrived, their expressions wary. The room was filled with tension as they took their seats. Elara glanced at her crew, who offered her reassuring nods. This was at the moment where they could change the course of their history. "Welcome," Elara began, her voice steady. "We appreciate your willingness to join us today. We understand the pain and anger that has driven this conflict, and we believe it's time to set aside our differences and find a way forward together." A rogue leader, a tall figure with scars marking his face, leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Why should we trust you? You represent a people that have fought against us for generations." "Because we're tired of war," Elara replied, her heart racing but her voice unwavering. "We've all lost too much. This is not just about us, it's about our future." our families, our children. We want to create a world where they can live without fear." The rogue leader exchanged glances with his companions. "And what do you propose? We have no reason to believe your intentions are genuine." "We propose a ceasefire," Alara said, her voice steady. "A commitment to stop the violence, to come together and share our resources, our knowledge. We can build a coalition focused on protecting our communities and rebuilding what has been lost." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling heavily upon them. Alara could sense the hesitation in the air, the flicker of doubt battling with a yearning for something different. "Are you suggesting we just lay down our weapons and trust you?" Another rogue member challenged, his voice thick with skepticism. "No," Alara replied, her tone firm. "I'm suggesting that we recognize the futility of this conflict. Laying down our weapons doesn't mean we abandon our principles. It means we choose a different path. One that leads to healing instead of further destruction." The tension in the room hung like a storm cloud, thick and heavy. Alara could feel the weight of the rogue leader's skepticism pressing down on her. They had been entrenched in conflict for so long that the notion of peace must have felt alien, perhaps even impossible. But she was determined to make them see that it was not only possible, it was necessary. "Consider what we've lost," Alara continued, her voice steady but passionate. "Every battle fought has taken lives, yours, ours, and innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire. We cannot continue this cycle of destruction. We must choose a different path, one where we can thrive together." The scarred leader, whose name Alara learned was Kale, leaned back in his chair, his expression inscrutable. "And if we agree to this ceasefire, what guarantees do we have? You can't promise that your side won't attack while we're vulnerable." Alara exchanged glances with Darren, whose brow furrowed with concern. "You're right to question our motives. Trust is not something we can expect to earn overnight. But we're willing to demonstrate our commitment through action." "What actions?" Kale pressed, his tone challenging. "Let's start small," Alara suggested, feeling the urgency of the moment. "We can establish a joint patrol along contested borders to prevent skirmishes. It will show both sides that we are committed to protecting one another rather than fighting." Darren nodded, adding, "See, we can also set up communication channels to address grievances as they arise. This will prevent misunderstandings from escalating into violence." A flicker of interest sparked in Kale's eyes, though skepticism lingered. "And what if your people refuse to comply? What recourse do we have?" Alara leaned in, sensing an opening. "If any faction breaks the ceasefire, we will hold them accountable together. We can create a council that includes representatives from both sides to address any violations. We must stand united in enforcing the peace we seek." Another rogue leader, a woman with fiery red hair named Mira, spoke up. "This all sounds good in theory, but how do we know it will work? What's to stop your people from using this ceasefire as a cover to regroup and prepare for more attacks?" Alara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their scrutiny. "We understand your fears. The history of conflict has bred mistrust. But if we want to change our future, we must take risks. We must be willing to meet each other halfway." Kale remained silent for a moment, contemplating her words. The air crackled with uncertainty, and Alara could almost hear the gears turning in their minds. She had to convince them that this was more than a political maneuver, it was a chance to reclaim their humanity. "What do you suggest, then?" Kale finally asked, his tone slightly softer. "How do we begin this journey?" Ilara's heart raced. "Let's draft an agreement right here, right now. We can outline the terms of the ceasefire and our plans for cooperation. Once it's in writing, we'll have a foundation to build upon." Mira exchanged glances with Kale, and Alara could see the shift in their expressions. Cautious optimism mingled with lingering doubt. "You'd be willing to commit this to writing?" she asked, skepticism still lacing her voice. "Absolutely," Alara replied, her resolve unwavering. "This is not just a verbal agreement, it must be tangible, something we can all hold accountable." Kale leaned forward, a glimmer of interest in his eyes. "Very well, let's see if you can turn words into action." Over the next few hours, the room buzzed with the energy of possibility. Alara worked with representatives from both sides to draft the agreement, poring over the details and negotiating terms that addressed the fears and needs of all involved. As they crafted the document, Alara felt the weight of their shared history pressing down on her. Each word was not just a clause. It was a promise of a future that could be forged through understanding and cooperation. When they finally reached a consensus, Alara felt a wave of relief wash over her. The document, now a symbol of their fragile alliance, was filled with provisions for the ceasefire, joint patrols, and mechanisms for addressing grievances. Cale held the agreement in his hands, studying it closely. "This is a good start," he said, his tone grudgingly appreciative. "But let's not forget that actions speak louder than words. We will hold you accountable if this fails." Alara nodded, feeling the gravity of his words. "I wouldn't expect anything less. We're all in this together now." With the agreement signed, a collective sense of hope emerged. The rogue leaders remained cautious, but Alara could see their resolve beginning to soften. They were no longer just enemies. They were partners in a shared struggle for survival. In the days that followed, the atmosphere aboard the Valor shifted dramatically. Where there had once been animosity, there was now a budding camaraderie. Joint patrols were established, and the Cathar and human crews worked side by side, learning from one another. Alara spent her time fostering these relationships, moving between groups, facilitating discussions, and encouraging collaboration. It was a delicate dance of trust building, but she felt the momentum shifting. Slowly, their shared humanity was blossoming amidst the ruins of conflict. One evening, as she strolled through the ship's common area, she overheard two Cathar crew members laughing with Marcus over a game of cards. The sound was music to her ears, a sign that they were finding common ground. "Looks like you're a natural at this," she teased Marcus as she joined them. "Just a bit of luck," he replied, grinning. "But I think they've got the hang of it. We've even started sharing stories about our worlds." Alara's heart swelled at the sight. That's what it's all about, finding those connections. As the days turned into weeks, the Joint Task Force began to solidify. They developed protocols for addressing any grievances and shared resources for rebuilding communities affected by the conflict. The shared focus on healing began to shift the narrative of their alliance from one of necessity to one of genuine partnership. But amidst the progress, a storm brewed on the horizon. News arrived one fateful day that rogue factions had launched an unprovoked attack on a civilian settlement on the outskirts of the Cathar territory. The reports were grim, casualties were high, and the destruction was devastating. Alara felt a chill run down her spine as she listened to Darren relay the news in the control room. "We need to respond immediately," he said, anger boiling beneath the surface. "We can't let them think we're weak." "Wait," Alara interjected, her heart racing. "We can't react impulsively. If we strike back without careful consideration, we risk igniting a larger conflict." Cale, who had been silently observing, finally spoke up. "They've violated the ceasefire. We must show them that there are consequences for their actions." Alara nodded, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. "But if we retaliate, we might lose the trust we've built. We have to address this situation strategically. Let's convene the council and discuss our options." The room fell silent as they contemplated her words. The rogue factions were testing the limits of their fragile alliance, and Alara knew that how they responded would define the future of their collaboration. Later that day, the council convened, representatives from both sides filling the room. Alara could feel the tension in the air as they discussed the rogue attack, everyone aware that this could unravel everything they had worked for. "We can't let this stand," one of the Cathar representatives argued. "If we don't respond with force, it will send a message that we're weak." "Responding with force will only escalate the violence," Alara countered, her voice firm. "We need to find a way to bring those responsible to justice without turning this into an all-out war." Cale leaned forward, his expression grave. "And how do you propose we do that? They've shown us their true colors." They don't want peace, they want chaos. Alara took a deep breath, weighing her words carefully. We need to isolate the rogue factions. We can reach out to the rest of their people, those who are tired of fighting, and show them that they don't have to follow this path. If we can convince them that the rogue leaders are endangering their safety, we might just turn the tide. A murmur of skepticism rippled through the room. Mira, the fiery-haired leader, spoke up. And if they refuse to listen, what then? Do we just sit back and allow them to attack again? No, Alara replied, her resolve unshakable. But we can send a message that we will not tolerate violence while also offering a path to redemption. We can negotiate with other factions that wish to distance themselves from the rogue leaders. Kale considered her words, and after a moment of tense silence, he nodded. Very well, we will pursue this route, but we must be prepared to act if they continue their aggression. Alara felt a rush of gratitude and relief. They were standing together, committed to a strategy that could prevent further bloodshed. But as she glanced around the room, she could see that not everyone was convinced. Alara sat at the long table in the council room, surrounded by Cathar and human representatives, each one tense and focused. The air was thick with anxiety as they prepared to send their first messages to the rogue factions, hoping to sway their followers and isolate the leaders who had instigated the attack on the civilian settlement. Let's make it clear that we're not just making threats, Alara said, her voice steady. This is about the future we want for our peoples. We're offering an opportunity for peace, not just retaliation. Darren, seated to her right, nodded in agreement. We must emphasize that joining the peace process is in their best interest. They'll face isolation if they continue down this path. Mira leaned forward, her eyes burning with determination. And we need to make it clear that the rogue leaders will be held accountable for their actions. They can't continue to terrorize innocent people. Alara took a deep breath, appreciating the fervor in the room. Let's draft a message that highlights our commitment to justice, while emphasizing the benefits of joining us for those who are weary of war. As they brainstormed ideas, Alara's mind raced. The stakes were high, and the balance between strength and diplomacy felt precarious. Each word in their message could mean the difference between healing and further violence. After hours of discussion, they finally crafted a statement. It was a powerful call to unity, addressing the rogue factions directly and inviting their followers to reconsider their loyalty. Together, we have the power to forge a different future, Alara read aloud, her heart pounding. We stand ready to welcome those who are tired of conflict, who wish to build a new society based on cooperation and mutual respect. We will not tolerate the violence of rogue leaders, and we will hold them accountable. But we offer a path of redemption and collaboration to all who wish to join us. As she finished reading, a palpable silence fell over the room. Kale, who had been observing quietly, finally spoke. This message carries weight. If they're willing to listen, we may yet reach those who are tired of fighting. Alara nodded, her spirits lifted. Now we need to determine how to disseminate this message effectively. We can use our ships to broadcast it across the territories, but we should also reach out to those who might have influence among the rogue factions. Mira stood, her posture exuding confidence. I have contacts in the outer settlements. We can leverage those connections to get our message into the hands of those who might influence the rogue faction's supporters. Excellent, Alara said, feeling a surge of hope. We need to act quickly. The longer we wait, the greater the risk of further attacks. As the council discussed logistics, Alara felt a sense of camaraderie that had blossomed over the past weeks. They were no longer just representatives of warring factions. They were allies, united by a common goal. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Messages were broadcast across communication networks, reaching far and wide. Alara felt a mix of hope and anxiety as they awaited responses from the rogue factions. Then, one evening, as she reviewed reports in the control room, a commotion erupted outside. Alara rushed to the doorway, her heart racing. A group of Cathar crew members stood clustered around a monitor, their expressions a blend of shock and anticipation. "What's happening?" Elara asked, pushing through the crowd. "Look!" one of the crew members exclaimed, pointing at the screen. The feed displayed a gathering of people in a Cathar settlement, some holding banners with the peace message they had crafted. "They're rallying for peace," another crew member shouted, excitement bubbling in their voice. Elara's heart soared as she watched the scene unfold. People from various factions had come together, their voices united in a call for an end to violence. "This is incredible," she breathed. "They're responding." The feed shifted to show a figure stepping forward, a familiar face from the rogue factions, a leader who had once been known for his fierce loyalty to the war effort. "We stand at a crossroads," he declared, his voice booming. "For too long, we have followed leaders who care only for power and conflict. It's time for a new path, one where we can work together for a brighter future." Elara felt tears prick at her eyes. This was the moment they had hoped for, a sign that their efforts were not in vain. As the days passed, the rally sparked a movement. Communities across Cathar and human territories began to organize, calling for peace and expressing their desire to break free from the cycle of violence. Elara felt invigorated, her spirits lifted by the collective determination that was now echoing throughout the region. But as she reveled in the growing momentum, she remained acutely aware of the lingering danger posed by the rogue leaders. They would not sit idly by while their influence waned. One evening, as Elara reviewed reports with her team, the alarms blared suddenly, piercing the air with urgency. The lights flickered, and chaos erupted as crew members rushed to their stations. "What's happening?" Elara shouted over the din, her heart racing as she grasped the console. "Unidentified ships are approaching," Marcus called out, his fingers flying across the controls. "They're ignoring our hails." Elara's stomach dropped. "Rogue factions." "Most likely," Darren replied, his expression grim as he scanned the data. "We need to prepare for a confrontation." "Get the ship ready for defensive maneuvers," Elara ordered, her mind racing. "And send out a message to the settlements to alert them of the threat." As her crew scrambled to follow her commands, Elara felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders. They had worked so hard to build trust, and now it seemed as if that fragile peace was on the brink of collapse. The rogue ships materialized on the horizon, their dark silhouettes ominous against the fading light. Elara stood on the bridge, her heart pounding as she watched them approach. "What are their intentions?" she asked, her voice taut with tension. "They're broadcasting a message," Marcus said, his eyes glued to the screen. "But it's not clear." "Put it through," Elara commanded. The speaker crackled to life, and a familiar voice filled the air. Kale, the Cathar leader who had previously shown a willingness to negotiate. But now his tone was strained, tinged with anger. "We are not afraid," Kale declared, his voice resolute. "We will not stand by as you threaten our people. We demand that you cease this peace process and return to the fight." Elara felt a chill run down her spine. "He's been turned," she whispered, realizing the rogue leaders had manipulated the very people who had once sought peace. The monitor shifted to show another leader, a shadowy figure whose face was obscured. "We will not be swayed by your false promises. You think you can dictate terms to us? We will show you the true strength of our resolve." Elara's thoughts raced. "They're trying to rally support against us," she said, her voice firm. "We need to counter this narrative before it spreads further." Darren clenched his fists, his expression fierce. "We can't allow them to undermine our efforts. We need to respond with clarity and strength." "Agreed," Elara said, determination surging within her. "Prepare a message for all channels. We will not be intimidated. We will reaffirm our commitment to peace and show that the majority stand with us." As her crew worked to draft the message, Elara took a deep breath, steadying herself for the fight ahead. She could feel the gravity of their situation pressing down on her, but she also felt an unyielding resolve. They had come too far to back down now. In the hours that followed, Elara's message was broadcast across the territories, a clear declaration of their intentions. Despite the threats and intimidation, we remain steadfast in our commitment to peace, she proclaimed, her voice echoing through the communication channels. We will not allow rogue leaders to dictate our future. Together, we stand united, and we will protect our communities from those who seek to sow discord. As the message went out, Elara felt a sense of hope bloom amidst the chaos. The people needed to see that their voices mattered, that they could shape their own destiny. But the rogue leaders were not done yet. In response to Elara's declaration, they launched a series of attacks on isolated settlements, igniting violence in areas that had begun to embrace the peace process. Casualties are mounting, Marcus reported grimly as they monitored the situation. We need to act now to protect those communities. Send out our ships to provide assistance, Elara commanded, her heart heavy. We can't allow this violence to continue unchecked. We must show the people that we are willing to fight for their safety, even in the face of this aggression. As they deployed their forces to respond to the attacks, Elara felt the weight of the moment. They were caught in a whirlwind of chaos, but amidst the turmoil, she saw a glimmer of hope. The people were rallying, united against the rogue leaders, their voices rising in defiance. The atmosphere on the Valor buzzed with urgency as Elara and her crew worked tirelessly to respond to the rogue leaders' attacks. Every hour felt like a battle of its own, filled with strategizing, coordination, and the emotional weight of lives at stake. Elara moved swiftly through the ship, her mind racing with the complexities of their situation. She could hear the low hum of machinery and the chatter of crew members as they organized supplies and prepared for their missions. The sense of camaraderie was palpable. They were united by a common goal, and that unity fueled her resolve. In the control room, Darren was monitoring the feeds from the settlements under threat. We've received reports of increasing resistance from local factions, he said, his brow furrowed with concern. They're struggling against the rogue forces, and we need to provide support quickly. Elara nodded, her heart heavy. Let's prioritize the settlements that are most at risk. We need to establish safe zones and coordinate evacuation efforts where necessary. We can't let innocent lives be lost. Agreed, Darren replied, his determination mirrored in his eyes. We'll also need to strengthen our communication with those who wish to resist the rogue factions. They need to know they're not alone. Elara felt a surge of gratitude for her team. Together, they had transformed the Valor into a beacon of hope amidst the storm of chaos. But even as they fought for peace, she couldn't shake the feeling that the rogue leaders would escalate their tactics. Days turned into weeks as they navigated the turmoil. Each time Elara thought they had made progress, the rogue leaders retaliated with more violence, attempting to sow fear and disillusionment among those who had begun to embrace the peace movement. One evening, as Elara reviewed the latest reports, a communication came through from one of the isolated settlements. The screen flickered to life, revealing a worn and weary woman, a community leader named Lyra, who had bravely taken a stand against the rogue factions. Elara, Lyra said, her voice strained but resolute. We're holding out, but the pressure is mounting. The rogue forces are relentless, and we need immediate assistance. Elara leaned closer to the screen, her heart racing. We're doing everything we can, Lyra. We'll send reinforcements and supplies as soon as possible. How are your people holding up? We're scared, Lyra admitted, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. But we're not backing down. We've rallied the townsfolk, and they're ready to fight for their homes. We just need support to push back against the rogues. Elara felt a mix of pride and sorrow for Lyra and her people. We'll be there. You're not alone in this fight. As the communication ended, Elara turned to Darren, determination hardening her resolve. We need to mobilize our forces immediately. If they're willing to fight, we have to provide them with the means to do so. Within hours, the Valor was abuzz with activity. Crews scrambled to gather supplies, weapons, and medical aid to send to Lyra's settlement. Elara felt a fierce sense of purpose, each moment pushing them closer to the people who needed them. Ready to deploy? Marcus asked as he joined Elara on the bridge, his eyes alight with anticipation. Almost, she replied, checking the operational maps spread across the control panel. We'll need to coordinate with local forces once we arrive. It's crucial that we reinforce their defenses without creating more chaos. Understood, Marcus said, a grin spreading across his face. Let's show them what we can do together. With their forces ready, Alara took a moment to address her crew. Standing before them, she felt a surge of pride for the teamwork and camaraderie they had built. This is a pivotal moment for all of us, she began, her voice firm and inspiring. We're not just fighting against rogue forces, we're fighting for our vision of a peaceful future. Every life we save, every settlement we protect, brings us one step closer to that dream. Cheers erupted from the crew, their energy infectious. Alara smiled, her heart swelling with hope. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. As they approached Lyra's settlement, the atmosphere shifted. The sun was setting, casting an orange hue across the landscape, and the distant sounds of conflict could be heard, a stark reminder of the battle ahead. We're getting reports of rogue activity in the area, Darren warned as they neared the coordinates. We need to be cautious. Everyone, stay alert, Alara instructed as the Valor hovered above the settlement, deploying transport shuttles filled with supplies and reinforcements. The shuttles touched down amid the chaos, and as Alara stepped out, she was greeted by Lyra and her people, a mix of fear and determination etched on their faces. "Thank you for coming," Lyra exclaimed, her relief evident as she clasped Alara's hand. "We've been holding the line, but they're pushing harder than ever." "Let's reinforce your defenses and ensure everyone is safe," Alara replied, rallying her crew and the local fighters. They moved swiftly, fortifying the settlement's perimeter with makeshift barricades and weapons. As night fell, the air thickened with tension. The glow of fires lit the faces of the defenders, and Alara could see the resolve in their eyes. They were ready to stand together, and that unity fueled her hope. "Stay vigilant," she instructed the assembled fighters. "They'll come for us when they think we're weakest. But we are not alone, we stand united." Hours passed, the stillness punctuated by distant shouts and the ominous sounds of battle drums. Alara felt a deep connection to the people around her. They were no longer just Cathar or human. They were allies bound by a shared purpose. Suddenly, the tranquility shattered. The sound of approaching footsteps and muffled voices grew louder, and the shadows of rogue fighters emerged on the horizon. Alara's heart raced as she signaled for silence. "Ready yourselves," she whispered, her gaze sweeping over the assembled fighters. "Hold your positions and wait for my command." As the rogue forces neared, Alara's senses heightened. She could see their numbers more than she had anticipated. But she knew they had something powerful on their side: unity. "Now!" she shouted as the first rogue fighters breached the perimeter. The defenders sprang into action, a coordinated surge of energy that caught the attackers off guard. Arrows flew, and energy blasts lit up the night, light the chaos of battle. Alara fought alongside Lyra and her people, her heart pounding as they pushed back against the rogue assault. "Keep pushing," Lyra yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We will not let them take our home." Alara felt adrenaline coursing through her veins as she fought beside her allies. Every move was strategic, fueled by their shared desire to protect what they had built together. As the battle raged, Alara's gaze flickered to the rogue leader at the front, an imposing figure directing the attack. She recognized him from the broadcasts, a powerful presence meant to instill fear. "We need to take out their leader," she shouted to Darren, who was fighting beside her. "I'm on it," he replied, determination etched on his face. Darren weaved through the chaos, positioning himself for a clear shot. Alara fought fiercely, creating a path for him, her focus unwavering. With a swift motion, Darren steadied his aim. "Cover me," he shouted, and Alara nodded, her heart pounding as she provided cover fire. The battle felt endless, each moment stretching into eternity. But as the tide turned, Alara saw Darren make his move. With precision, he took aim and fired. The energy blast struck the rogue leader, sending him sprawling to the ground. The chaos around them seemed to pause for a brief moment, shock rippling through the rogue forces. Elara seized the opportunity. "Now is our chance. Push forward," she commanded. With renewed vigor, the defenders surged, driving back the rogue forces. Elara felt the adrenaline surging through her as they fought together, side by side, reclaiming their home. After what felt like hours, the battle began to wane. The remaining rogue fighters, realizing they were outmatched, turned to flee. Cheers erupted from the defenders as they drove the last of the attackers away. Breathing heavily, Elara looked around at the faces of those she had fought alongside. They were battered and bruised, but victorious. Lyra approached, her eyes shining with tears of relief. "We did it. We actually did it." Elara felt a surge of pride. "You fought bravely. This is a testament to what we can accomplish together." As the adrenaline faded, the weight of their victory settled in. They had defended their home, but the battle was far from over. The rogue leaders would not easily relinquish their hold on power. "Now we need to regroup and fortify our defenses," Elara said, her mind racing with strategy. "We can't let this victory become a fleeting moment. We need to use it to galvanize the support of those still on the fence." In the days that followed, the settlement began to heal. With the rogue forces driven away, they focused on rebuilding and reinforcing their community. Elara and her crew remained present, helping wherever they could, offering support and resources to the defenders. As the sun rose over the settlement, casting a warm glow on the remnants of battle, Elara surveyed the landscape. The scars of conflict marked the earth, but amidst the destruction, there was an undeniable spirit of resilience. People were already at work, clearing debris and tending to the wounded. It was a reminder of their strength, an embodiment of their commitment to a future free from tyranny. Lyra approached Elara, her face still smudged with soot but brightened by a hopeful smile. "We're organizing a community gathering tonight," she said, her tone filled with determination. "We want to celebrate our victory and discuss our next steps. Your presence would mean a lot to everyone." Elara felt a surge of gratitude. "I'd be honored to join. This victory belongs to all of you. I'm just glad I could help." As Lyra moved away to rally the townsfolk, Elara took a moment to reflect. They had faced overwhelming odds and emerged stronger, but the threat of the rogue leaders still loomed large. Their resolve must not waver. Later that evening, as dusk settled in and the stars began to twinkle overhead, the community gathered in the town square. Makeshift banners hung between buildings, vibrant colors representing both Cathar and human unity. Elara felt a deep sense of pride as she stood among them, witnessing the hope that blossomed from shared struggle. Lyra took center stage, addressing the crowd. "Today, we stand together, not as separate factions, but as one community united in our desire for peace." The crowd erupted in cheers, a chorus of voices that echoed through the night. Elara stepped forward, her heart swelling with emotion. "Your courage has inspired many, and what we've achieved together is a testament to the power of unity. But our work is far from over. The rogue leaders will not give up easily, and we must remain vigilant." Nods of agreement spread through the crowd, the fire of determination burning brightly in their eyes. "As we gather strength, let us also reach out to those who still follow the rogue leaders," Elara continued. "We need to show them that our path forward is one of cooperation, not conflict. Let us share our stories and our vision for a better future." Lyra beamed at Elara, and the crowd erupted once more in applause. The sense of solidarity was palpable, and Elara knew that this was only the beginning. The heart of resistance was alive, and it beat stronger than ever. In the following days, Elara and her team worked closely with Lyra and other local leaders to strategize their next moves. They set up communication lines with nearby settlements, encouraging them to join the peace process and share their experiences. Darren, ever the strategist, suggested, "We should create a series of broadcasts to reach those in the rogue factions. Let's share our story of victory, of what can be achieved when we unite against oppression." Elara nodded, inspired by the idea. "Yes, we'll highlight not just the battle, but the sense of community and purpose that's emerged from it." People need to see that there's hope beyond conflict. As they planned their broadcasts, Ilara felt a renewed sense of purpose. Each story shared, each voice amplified, was a step toward turning the tide. They would show the factions that there was a different way, a way that valued life over power. As the weeks passed, their efforts began to bear fruit. Messages of solidarity and support poured in from neighboring settlements. People were inspired by the courage displayed in the aftermath of the battle, and many began to question their allegiance to the rogue leaders. One evening, as Ilara prepared for another broadcast, Marcus approached her with a look of excitement. "We've received word from a former lieutenant of the rogue leaders. He wants to defect and share information about their operations." Ilara's heart raced. This could be huge. If he can provide insight into their strategies and weaknesses, we can prepare ourselves for future confrontations. Marcus nodded. "He's willing to meet us at the border of their territory. But it's risky. We'll need to ensure it's safe for him to come over." "Let's coordinate with our local allies," Ilara said, determination setting her jaw. "We can create a safe passage and have our forces ready to respond if needed. We can't miss this opportunity." The following day, Ilara, Darren, and a small team set out to meet the defecting lieutenant. The air was thick with tension as they navigated the borderlands between the factions. They had chosen a secluded area near a rocky outcrop, hoping to avoid detection. As they arrived, Ilara scanned the surroundings. "Keep an eye out. We don't know if the rogue factions are monitoring this area." Moments later, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall and worn, but unmistakably bearing the signs of a soldier who had once commanded respect. His name was Jarek, and he approached with cautious steps. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice a mix of relief and apprehension. "I didn't know if you'd trust me." Ilara extended her hand. "We're here to listen. If you have information that can help us, it's worth the risk." Jarek took a deep breath, his eyes darting nervously. "The rogue leaders are growing desperate. They're losing support, and they know it. But they're planning a major offensive, something that could turn the tide back in their favor." Ilara's stomach dropped. "What kind of offensive?" "They're gathering their forces for a strike against several key settlements that have expressed support for peace. If they succeed, it could crush morale and destabilize everything you've built," Jarek explained, his urgency palpable. Jarek hesitated before pulling a small data pad from his pocket. "I managed to download their plans before I left. It's not complete, but it outlines their targets and timelines. You need to act fast." Ilara took the data pad, her heart racing as she scanned the information. This was exactly what they needed. "Thank you for this," she said earnestly. "You're risking everything to help us." Jarek nodded, determination shining in his eyes. "I just want to see an end to the violence. I can't go back to that life." Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the air, followed by a whirring sound. "We're not alone," Darren shouted, shoving Jarek behind him as they scanned the area. Ilara's heart raced as she spotted a group of rogue fighters emerging from the trees. "We need to move," she yelled, adrenaline surging through her veins. "Fall back." As they raced back toward their vehicles, Ilara could hear the shouts of the rogue soldiers behind them. "They're closing in," Marcus shouted, his breath coming in heavy gasps. "Get to the transport," Ilara urged, glancing back to see Jarek struggling to keep pace. "We can't leave him." Darren turned, his eyes fierce. "I'll cover you. Go." "No," Ilara shouted, but Darren was already positioning himself, his weapon drawn. "We'll get him back." With a nod, she sprinted toward Jarek, her heart pounding as bullets whizzed by. "We're almost there," she called out, extending her hand. Jarek grasped her hand, pulling himself up just as another shot rang out, hitting the ground near Darren. "Hurry!" Darren yelled, firing back at the approaching rogue forces. Ilara and Jarek reached the transport as Darren held his ground, buying them precious seconds. "Get in!" he shouted, his focus unwavering. As Ilara climbed into the transport, she felt a pang of fear for Darren. "Marcus, go," she urged. With a swift motion, Marcus slammed the door shut and activated the engines. "Hold on," he shouted as they took off, leaving Darren behind. Alara's heart sank as they soared into the sky. "We can't leave him," she cried, panic rising in her chest. "Darren knows how to handle himself," Marcus said firmly, but Alara could see the worry in his eyes. "We'll regroup and come back for him." Back at the settlement, the mood was somber as they debriefed. Alara paced the room, her mind racing with concern for Darren. They had lost too many friends already, and she couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness. "Jarek's information is solid," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "We need to act on it immediately." "I know," Alara replied, her frustration boiling beneath the surface. "But we can't just plan without knowing what's happening to Darren." "Let's prepare for the offensive," Jarek suggested. "I can help you with strategies based on what I've seen. We can outmaneuver them." Alara looked at him, torn between the urgency of the situation and her fear for Darren's safety. "You're right. We can't let his sacrifice be in vain. We have to protect the settlements they're targeting." They spent the next few hours strategizing, poring over the data Jarek had provided. Alara pushed her worry for Darren to the back of her mind, focusing instead on how to defend the communities at risk. The air was thick with anticipation as Alara stood before the gathered leaders and her crew, the weight of responsibility pressing heavily on her shoulders. The sun cast a pale light over the planning table, like the holographic map that displayed the rogue leaders' intended targets. Alara felt a surge of determination. They couldn't afford to falter now. "We have the advantage of foresight," she began, her voice steady but passionate. "We know the rogue leaders are planning to strike 3 settlements, Valia, Reiner, and Eldrin. Each one is crucial to our cause. If we can defend these locations, we can send a strong message that we will not back down." Lyra nodded, her expression serious. "How do you propose we divide our forces? We can't leave any settlement vulnerable." Alara pointed to the map, her finger hovering over the settlements. "I suggest we send 2 teams to Valia and Reiner, focusing on fortifying their defenses and evacuating civilians if necessary. I'll take a smaller team to Eldrin, which is the farthest away and may be the most vulnerable." "What about Darren?" Marcus interjected, concern etched on his face. "We need to factor him into our plans." Alara paused, the pain of his absence washing over her. "Darren is a skilled fighter, and if he's able to rejoin us, he will. We can't wait for him. We have to act now." The group murmured in agreement, the tension palpable. They had lost too much already, and they knew every moment counted. As they finalized their strategy, Alara felt the weight of her decision pressing heavily on her heart. The morning of their offensive, Alara stood on the deck of the Valor, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She could see the distant outlines of the settlements they were about to defend. Her mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. The stakes had never been higher, and the fear of loss loomed large. "Ready to roll out?" Marcus called, his voice breaking through her reverie. Alara nodded, steeling herself for the challenges ahead. "Let's make sure we're prepared for anything. Our priority is to protect the civilians." As the team boarded their respective transports, Alara felt a mix of hope and apprehension. They were a small but determined force, united by a shared purpose. They had trained for this, but nothing could truly prepare them for the chaos of battle. The transport soared through the sky, the wind whipping past as they approached Eldrin. Alara's heart raced as she spotted the settlement nestled among rolling hills. From this vantage point, it looked peaceful, but she knew that could change in an instant. "Everyone, stay alert," she instructed, her voice firm. "We need to make contact with the local leaders as soon as we land. They should be aware of our presence and ready to coordinate." As they touched down, the tension in the air was palpable. Alara led her team off the transport, scanning the area for any signs of trouble. The streets were quiet, but she could sense the underlying fear among the townsfolk. "We need to establish a command post," she said, rallying her team. Let's set up communication lines and start fortifying the perimeter. As they moved through the settlement, Elara noticed the worried faces of the townspeople. An elderly man approached her, his hands trembling. "Are you here to protect us?" he asked, his voice quaking with fear. "We are," Elara assured him, her heart aching at the vulnerability etched on his face. "We'll do everything we can to keep you safe." Hours passed as they prepared for the impending attack. Elara and her team set up makeshift barricades and distributed weapons to those willing to fight. She felt a growing sense of urgency, knowing that the rogue forces could strike at any moment. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the edge of the settlement. Elara turned to see a group of townsfolk gathered, their expressions a mix of fear and disbelief. She rushed over, her heart racing. "What's happening?" she asked, pushing through the crowd. "It's a group of rogue fighters," a woman shouted, her voice laced with panic. "They're approaching from the north." Elara's instincts kicked in. "Get everyone to safety. We need to prepare for their arrival." As the townsfolk began to disperse, Elara quickly gathered her team. "They're here earlier than we expected. We need to be ready to defend the settlement." The sound of boots pounding on the ground echoed in the distance as the rogue fighters drew closer. Elara positioned her team at strategic points along the perimeter, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Stay focused," she reminded them. "We've trained for this. Remember your positions and communicate. We'll hold the line." As the rogue forces emerged from the tree line, Elara could see their numbers far greater than she had anticipated. Her heart sank, but she forced herself to remain calm. They had to be strong for the townspeople who were counting on them. "Hold your fire until I give the signal," Elara shouted, her voice cutting through the tension. The rogue leader, a tall man with a menacing presence, stepped forward, his voice booming. "You think you can protect this place? Surrender now, and we may let you live." Elara stepped forward, meeting his gaze. "We will never surrender. This is our home, and we will fight to protect it." With a roar, the rogue forces charged forward, and Elara felt a surge of determination. "Now!" she shouted, and her team opened fire, the sound of weapons discharging ringing through the air. Chaos erupted as the two sides clashed. Elara fought fiercely alongside her team, her heart pounding in her chest. The rogue fighters were relentless, but her determination fueled her strength. She could see townsfolk joining the fight, armed with whatever they could find, their spirits unyielding. "Push them back," she yelled, rallying her team. "We can't let them take this place." As the battle raged on, Elara caught sight of a familiar face among the chaos. Jerk, the defecting lieutenant. He was fighting alongside the townsfolk, his presence a testament to the power of unity. "Jerk," she called out, grateful to see him. "Help cover the east side." He nodded, moving with purpose as they coordinated their efforts. Elara felt a renewed sense of hope. They were not alone in this fight. The battle continued, the air thick with gunfire and cries of determination. Elara ducked behind a barricade, catching her breath for a moment. The rogue forces were pushing hard, but they were holding the line. Suddenly, a burst of energy hit the barricade, sending debris flying. Elara stumbled back, her ears ringing from the blast. She regained her footing and looked around, assessing the situation. They were outnumbered, but she refused to back down. "Reinforcements!" she shouted to her team. "We need to pull back and regroup at the main square." As they retreated, Elara felt the weight of responsibility press down on her. Lives depended on their success, and she couldn't let them down. Once they reached the square, Elara quickly organized her team. "We need to establish a defensive perimeter here. Use whatever we can find." Jerk joined her, determination etched on his face. "We have to create choke points. If we can funnel them through specific areas, we can control the flow of the battle." Elara nodded, grateful for his insight. "Let's set up barricades on either side of the square. If we can funnel them into a confined space, we can strike harder." As they worked together, the sounds of battle continued to echo around them. Elara's heart raced, but she focused on the task at hand. They had to hold their ground. Minutes turned into hours as the battle dragged on. The rogue forces were relentless, but so were the defenders. Ilara could see the determination in the eyes of her team and the townsfolk who fought beside them. They were not just defending a settlement, they were fighting for their future. With a defensive perimeter in place, Ilara took a moment to catch her breath. She could feel the exhaustion creeping in, but she pushed it aside. "We can't let up," she reminded herself. Suddenly, the rogue leader appeared again, rallying his troops. "You think you can win? You're outnumbered and outmatched. Lay down your arms, and we will spare your lives." Ilara stepped forward, her voice rising above the din. "You will not intimidate us. We will fight for our homes, our families, and our freedom." The crowd roared in response, a wave of energy surging through them. Ilara could feel the power of unity coursing in her veins. This was not just about survival, it was about hope. As the battle raged on, Ilara and her team fought with everything they had. The rogue forces began to falter, their morale shaken by the fierce resistance. Ilara seized the moment, rallying her team for one final push. "Now is our chance," she shouted, adrenaline surging through her. "Let's show them what we're made of." With a renewed sense of purpose, the defenders surged forward, pushing the rogue forces back. Ilara fought alongside Jarek, their movements synchronized as they worked to take down the enemy. The rogue leader's desperate command pierced through the chaos of battle, and for a moment, Ilara felt a surge of hope. They were gaining ground. The tide was finally turning. The defenders pushed forward, determination etched on every face, each fighter fueled by the desire to protect their homes. "Keep pushing," Ilara shouted, her voice rising above the din. She could see fear creeping into the eyes of the rogue fighters as her team pressed harder, cutting through the lines of resistance. They were not just a band of fighters, they were a force fueled by unity and purpose. As they advanced, the rogue forces began to break apart, some fleeing into the woods while others dropped their weapons, surrendering in the face of overwhelming resolve. Ilara felt a surge of exhilaration. Victory was within their grasp. Jarek fought alongside her, his brow furrowed in concentration. "We can't let any of them regroup. If they escape, they'll just come back stronger." Ilara nodded, her heart racing. "Let's sweep the area and make sure no one is left behind. We can't afford to be complacent." With renewed energy, Ilara and her team moved methodically through the outskirts of Eldrin, checking for any stragglers. The sounds of battle had diminished, replaced by the heavy silence that follows conflict, a stark reminder of the price they had all paid. "Over here," a voice called from behind a stack of crates. Ilara rushed over, finding a young woman, her face streaked with dirt and fear. "I thought they were going to kill us," she said, trembling. "It's okay," Ilara reassured her, offering a hand. "You're safe now. We've pushed them back." As they helped the woman to her feet, Ilara felt a sense of relief. They had fought hard, and it seemed the worst was over. But even as she reassured the townsfolk, a nagging sense of dread lingered in the back of her mind. What would happen next? Once they regrouped in the town square, Ilara gathered her team to assess the situation. The mood was a mixture of relief and exhaustion, faces smudged with ash and dirt. But there was also a spark of triumph in their eyes. "Great work, everyone," she said, her voice steady. "We've successfully defended Eldrin, but we need to ensure the safety of the other settlements as well. We can't let the rogue leaders regroup and retaliate." Marcus nodded, a look of determination on his face. "We should send word to Valia and Reiner. They might still be in danger." Jarek chimed in, "I can help with that. I have connections to some former allies. They'll get the message out quickly." Ilara felt a swell of gratitude for the unexpected camaraderie. "Thank you, Jarek. Let's not waste any time. We need to fortify our defenses here and prepare for any possible counterattacks." As night fell, the atmosphere was tense yet hopeful. Ilara couldn't shake the worry for Darren. He had been absent during the battle, and even though she knew he was capable, the uncertainty gnawed at her. "Do you think he's okay?" she asked Marcus quietly as they surveyed the settlement from a high vantage point. "He'll be fine," Marcus replied, though his tone didn't entirely reflect certainty. "He's a fighter, but I understand your worry. We should send out a search party if he doesn't show up soon." Alara nodded, her heart heavy with concern. They needed every strong arm they could get, especially now that they had drawn attention to themselves by defeating the rogue forces. As dawn broke, a sense of urgency filled the air. The team had prepared the settlement for potential reinforcements, barricades reinforced, and townsfolk reassured. But Alara's thoughts were still clouded by Darren's absence. Just as she was about to address the group, a figure appeared on the horizon. Relief washed over her as she recognized Darren, bloodied but standing tall, striding toward them with purpose. "Darren," she called, racing toward him. He looked worn but unbroken, a fierce fire in his eyes. "Sorry I'm late," he said with a wry smile, though it faded as he caught sight of the tension in Alara's gaze. "What did I miss?" "Just the battle for Eldrin," she replied, her voice tinged with both relief and exasperation. "You should have been here. We could have used your skills." "I was dealing with a rogue unit that was trying to flank us from the east," Darren explained, catching his breath. "I didn't realize they'd shifted their focus to Eldrin." Alara took a step back, assessing his condition. "Are you hurt? We need you at full strength if we're going to protect the others." "I'll be fine," he assured her, but she could see the fatigue etched on his face. "What's the plan now?" As the sun rose higher, light the aftermath of the battle, Alara gathered her team once more. "We've defended Eldrin, but we need to ensure that Valia and Reiner are safe. Jerk has offered to send word, but we can't wait. We need to mobilize our forces." Darren nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "I can help with scouting. We should send a small team to check on those settlements before it gets too late." Lyra stepped forward. "I can go with you. The people in Valia know me, and I can help rally their defenses." "Good idea," Alara said, a sense of pride swelling in her chest for her team's determination. "Let's coordinate our efforts and move quickly. The last thing we need is for the rogue leaders to regroup and retaliate." With a plan in place, Alara watched as Darren and Lyra prepared to leave. The urgency of the situation weighed heavily on her mind, but she also felt a flicker of hope. They were stronger together, and they had the potential to bring peace to the region. As they set out, Alara turned to Jerk. "How can we strengthen our communications? We need to stay connected, especially if we're dealing with multiple fronts." "I can help with that," he replied, his expression serious. "I have experience with setting up secure channels. We can create a network that will allow us to share information quickly." "Let's get started on that," Alara said, feeling the adrenaline surging through her. Every moment counts. The hours passed as they worked tirelessly to establish communication lines and fortify their defenses. As dusk approached, Alara felt a sense of accomplishment, but it was tempered by the worry for her friends in Valia and Reiner. Suddenly, a shout rang out from the perimeter. "Incoming!" a guard yelled, pointing toward the horizon. Alara's heart raced. "What do we have?" "Rogue fighters. Looks like they're regrouping," the guard responded, panic creeping into his voice. "Everyone, to your positions!" Alara shouted, adrenaline flooding her veins as she rallied her team. "We've prepared for this. We can hold them off." As the rogue fighters approached, Alara's mind raced with strategies. They couldn't afford to let their defenses falter. "We'll form a line and push them back. Focus on the front." The rogue forces descended upon Eldrin like a dark wave, but Alara's team stood resolute, weapons ready and spirits high. She felt a familiar sense of purpose igniting within her, fueled by the unity of their cause. "Fire at will," she commanded, and the sounds of battle erupted once more, gunfire echoing through the air as they engaged the enemy. Alara moved fluidly through the chaos, her instincts guiding her as she fought alongside her comrades. Each shot fired, each step taken, was a testament to their resilience. They had already fought for their homes once. They could do it again. Jarek was at her side, working seamlessly with her as they pushed forward. "They're trying to flank us from the left," he shouted, pointing toward a group of rogue fighters attempting to break through the lines. "Redirect fire. We can't let them split our forces," Ilara yelled back, feeling the adrenaline surge through her veins. As they fought, Ilara noticed a shift in the rogue forces. Their leader was attempting to rally them, shouting commands as they struggled to maintain their advance. It was an opportunity. "Jarek, we need to target their leader," Ilara shouted. "If we can take him down, it might break their morale." "On it," Jarek replied, determination etched on his face. "Cover me." Ilara nodded, moving to create a protective barrier as Jarek advanced. She could see the rogue leader now, his presence dominating the battlefield. He was tall, muscular, with a grim expression, and the way he commanded his forces made it clear that he was a formidable opponent. "Cover fire," Ilara yelled, her team providing support as Jarek moved in, taking careful aim. The rogue leader glanced their way, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. In that moment, Ilara felt a surge of hope and fear intertwined. If they could take him down, it could turn the tide of battle in their favor. The air crackled with tension as Jarek took aim at the rogue leader. Ilara could see the intensity in his eyes, the determination to strike a blow that could shift the momentum of the battle. Everything hung in the balance. "Now!" Ilara shouted, urgency compelling her to act. She raised her weapon and fired toward a group of approaching rogue fighters to draw their attention away from Jarek. The cacophony of gunfire filled the air, a symphony of chaos that underscored the stakes of their fight. With a focused breath, Jarek squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, slicing through the battlefield and finding its mark. The rogue leader staggered, his eyes wide with shock as he fell to the ground, the roar of his command silenced. A ripple of uncertainty washed over the remaining rogue fighters, their formation faltering. Ilara seized the moment. "Push forward, don't let up," she urged, her voice rising above the fray. The defenders rallied, emboldened by the fall of their opponent. With renewed vigor, they surged forward, pushing the rogue fighters back. Ilara felt a swell of pride for her team and the townsfolk who fought alongside them. They were more than just defenders. They were warriors united by a common cause. As the battle wore on, Ilara lost herself in the rhythm of combat, adrenaline driving her forward. Each rogue fighter they pushed back felt like a small victory, yet the toll of the battle weighed heavily on her heart. She glanced around, taking in the faces of her comrades, the determination, the fear, and the resolve etched into their expressions. "Stay together," she called out, her voice firm. "We can't let them break our lines." Just then, she caught sight of a familiar figure in the distance, Darren, his eyes fierce as he fought valiantly against a group of rogue fighters. He had always been a source of strength for her, and seeing him there fueled her resolve. "Darren," she yelled, trying to catch his attention. "We need to flank them from the right." He turned, nodding in understanding, and immediately pivoted to lead a charge. Ilara felt a surge of pride and gratitude. Together, they were an unstoppable force. The hours dragged on, and the battle raged with relentless fury. Ilara's arms burned from the strain, and her heart pounded in her chest. She could see the tide shifting as the rogue forces began to falter under the weight of their combined efforts. "Keep pushing," Jarek shouted, rallying the troops. "We can't let them regroup." Ilara nodded, determination flooding her veins. She took a deep breath, focusing on the task at hand. As they pressed forward, she felt the adrenaline surge once more, invigorating her spirit. Suddenly, a loud explosion echoed through the air, shaking the ground beneath them. Ilara stumbled, regaining her balance as she scanned the area for the source of the blast. Smoke billowed from the east side of the settlement, and her heart sank. "We need to get to that explosion," she shouted, motioning for her team to follow. They raced toward the thick smoke, fear coursing through Ilara. As they neared the source, the sight that greeted them made her stomach churn. A group of rogue fighters had set fire to a cluster of buildings, flames licking the sky and smoke choking the air. "We can't let them spread the fire," Ilara yelled, adrenaline coursing through her as she assessed the situation. "Jarek, take the left flank, Lyra, with me." They moved swiftly, Ilara and Lyra working together to douse the flames while Jarek provided cover fire. The townsfolk joined them, carrying buckets of water and using whatever means they could to combat the encroaching flames. "Don't let them win," Ilara urged as they fought the blaze, her heart racing. "We've come too far to let them destroy our home." With the combined efforts of the defenders, they managed to contain the fire, but the rogue fighters continued to press in from all sides. Ilara felt the weight of exhaustion creeping into her bones, but she refused to back down. They were fighting for their lives and the lives of the people they had vowed to protect. As she turned to face the chaos, a rogue fighter charged toward her. Instinct kicked in, and she sidestepped just in time, firing her weapon and striking him down. But the victory was short-lived. She turned to find another rogue fighter rushing in from behind. "Look out!" Jarek shouted, but it was too late. The rogue swung a crude weapon, knocking Ilara off her feet. She hit the ground hard, the wind knocked from her lungs. For a moment, everything blurred, and she struggled to regain her breath. Panic surged within her as the rogue fighter advanced, ready to strike again. Just as she thought it was over, she saw a flash of movement from the corner of her eye. Darren lunged in, tackling the rogue fighter to the ground. The two struggled in a fierce melee, and Ilara's heart raced as she scrambled to her feet, grabbing her weapon. "Darren!" she yelled, rushing to help. With a well-aimed shot, she struck the rogue fighter, ending the threat. Breathing heavily, she knelt beside Darren. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern flooding her voice. "Just a scratch," he replied, catching his breath. "We need to keep moving. They're not giving up." The battle continued to rage, but Ilara could feel the tide turning. The remaining rogue fighters were beginning to lose their resolve, and the defenders' spirits soared. They were fighting not just for survival, but for a future free from tyranny. Ilara glanced at Jarek, who was directing the townsfolk in a coordinated attack against the remaining rogue forces. "Let's push them back," she called out, her voice ringing with conviction. With renewed energy, Ilara and her team surged forward, pushing through the chaos. They fought as one, each movement synchronized in a powerful display of unity. The rogue fighters, realizing their defeat, began to retreat. "Don't let them escape," Ilara shouted, urging her team onward. "We have to finish this." As the defenders closed in, the remaining rogue forces scattered, fleeing into the woods like shadows disappearing into the night. Ilara stood tall, her heart racing with exhilaration and relief. "We did it," she exclaimed, her voice echoing through the silence that followed the storm of battle. The sounds of gunfire faded, replaced by the heavy breathing of her team and the distant cries of the townsfolk. But the victory came at a cost. As the dust settled, Ilara's gaze fell on the wounded and the fallen. Her heart ached at the sight of comrades and civilians alike, some lying motionless, others crying out in pain. "We need to attend to the wounded," she said, her voice steady but laced with sorrow. "Everyone, help wherever you can." They rushed to assist the injured, providing medical attention and comfort to those in need. Ilara found herself kneeling beside an elderly man, his face pale and eyes filled with pain. "I'm sorry, we tried to protect you," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "You fought bravely, my dear," he replied, his voice a fragile whisper. "You've given us hope. Don't lose it now." Her heart clenched at his words, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. They had fought hard, but the price of victory was steep. As night fell, the air was thick with grief and relief. They had defended Eldrin, but the scars of battle remained. Ilara and her team gathered in the town square, the flickering light of makeshift torches casting shadows on their weary faces. "Today was a victory, but it came at a cost," Ilara began, her voice heavy with emotion. "We've lost friends, and many more are wounded. We need to honor those who fought and fell today." Marcus stepped forward, his expression somber. "We need to organize a memorial for those we've lost. They deserve to be remembered." Lyra nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And we must prepare for what comes next. The rogue leaders won't just disappear." Elara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their words. "You're right. We can't let our guard down. We must find a way to unify the settlements and ensure this doesn't happen again." Jarek spoke up, his voice resolute. "We should reach out to the other settlements. They need to know they're not alone, that we can stand together against the threat." Elara nodded, grateful for the camaraderie. "Let's form a council to discuss our next steps. We'll need to gather information and resources to ensure our safety." As the group dispersed to tend to their duties, Elara lingered in the square, her heart heavy with the memories of the day. She could still hear the echoes of gunfire, the cries of the wounded, and the faces of those they had lost. "Hey," Darren said softly, approaching her. "You did well today. You led us through a nightmare." Elara looked up at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you and everyone else. We fought together." Darren nodded, his expression serious. "We'll have to be ready for whatever comes next. They'll regroup. We need to prepare." The sun rose over Eldrin, casting a golden hue over the remnants of the battle. The air was heavy with the scent of smoke and the echoes of yesterday's chaos, but the dawn brought a promise of hope. Elara stood in the town square, surveying the damage with a heavy heart. The loss of life weighed on her, but she felt a resolute determination growing within her. As the townsfolk began to gather, the mood shifted from despair to resilience. Elara could see them banding together, helping each other clean up the debris and tending to the wounded. They had fought valiantly, and now it was time to heal and rebuild. "Today, we honor those who fell," Elara began, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. "Their bravery and sacrifice will never be forgotten. We are stronger together, and together we will rebuild Eldrin." The townsfolk nodded, their expressions a mix of sorrow and determination. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We lost so much, but we have each other. We'll stand united against any future threats." Marcus raised his voice, his resolve unwavering. "Let's not only rebuild our homes but strengthen our defenses. We need to ensure that our community is prepared for whatever comes next." Elara felt the fire of their unity reignite within her. "Absolutely. We need to form a council, bring together representatives from Eldrin and the surrounding settlements. If we work together, we can create a network of support to keep us safe." Over the next few days, Elara and her team worked tirelessly to organize the community. They established a council that included leaders from Valia, Reiner, and other nearby settlements. The response was overwhelming. Representatives arrived, ready to unite against the common threat. In the council meetings, Elara felt a renewed sense of purpose. Each representative brought unique insights and experiences, and together they crafted a plan for a united front. They discussed everything from defense strategies to supply chains, forging alliances that had long been needed. One evening, as they wrapped up a particularly intense meeting, Jarek leaned back in his chair, a grin breaking across his face. "I think we might actually pull this off. Look at us, who would have thought we could gather so many allies?" Elara smiled, a warm sense of camaraderie enveloping her. "We've faced the worst together. Now it's time to build a future that reflects our strength." As weeks turned into months, the scars of battle began to heal. Eldrin transformed from a site of despair into a hub of activity. The community came together to fortify their defenses, constructing barriers and training in combat techniques. They organized supply routes to ensure they could withstand any future threats. Darren often led training sessions, his fierce spirit inspiring those around him. Elara watched as people from different settlements bonded, sharing stories and experiences. It was a beautiful sight, a tapestry of unity woven from threads of shared struggle. But the specter of the rogue leaders still loomed. Rumors circulated about their regrouping, and Elara knew they had to stay vigilant. They couldn't allow their guard to drop, even in the midst of rebuilding. "Have we heard anything new?" Elara asked Marcus one day as they stood on the battlements, surveying the perimeter. Nothing concrete, but we should expect movement. The leaders won't just let us be, Marcus replied, his brow furrowed in thought. We need to prepare for an escalation. Alara nodded, determination hardening in her chest. Let's send out scouts. We need to know what we're up against. The council convened again, and as the members gathered, a palpable tension filled the air. Alara could feel the weight of their collective worry. They needed a plan, a solid strategy to address the looming threat. We've fortified our defenses, but we need to take the fight to them if they're organizing, Darren said, his voice firm. We can't let them regroup and strike us when we least expect it. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. We need to gather intelligence on their movements, Lyra added. If we can pinpoint their location, we can disrupt their plans. Alara considered their options, the weight of leadership pressing heavily on her shoulders. I agree. Let's send a reconnaissance team to gather information. We need to know their numbers, their resources, and their strategies. As they formulated their plan, Alara felt a sense of resolve. They had come so far, and she refused to let fear dictate their fate. They were a united front, and together they would stand against any threat. Days later, the reconnaissance team returned with crucial information. The rogue leaders were regrouping in a nearby forest, a makeshift camp forming among the trees. Alara felt a chill run down her spine at the thought of them consolidating power so close to Eldrin. We need to act swiftly, she told the council, her voice unwavering. We can't allow them to establish a stronghold. Darren nodded, determination etched on his face. We'll strike at dawn. If we catch them off guard, we can dismantle their plans before they gain strength. Ilara's heart raced with the gravity of the decision. We'll have to be strategic. We need to divide their forces, create confusion. If we work together, we can do this. The council members began to strategize, each bringing their strengths to the table. They devised a plan to infiltrate the rogue camp, using stealth and surprise to catch the leaders off guard. As night fell, Alara gathered her team, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. They prepared their weapons, checking gear and exchanging words of encouragement. Alara felt a mix of nerves and excitement. This was their chance to take the fight to the enemy. Remember, we're doing this for our homes, our families, she reminded them, her voice steady. We've fought hard to get here, and we will not let fear dictate our future. With a collective nod, they set out under the cover of darkness, their hearts pounding in sync with the rhythm of their steps. The forest loomed ahead, shadows twisting and turning as they moved silently through the underbrush. As they approached the rogue camp, Alara signaled for silence. She could see the flickering flames of the campfires, shadows dancing against the trees. The air was thick with tension, and she could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Stay low, she whispered, gesturing for her team to spread out. They moved like ghosts, slipping through the darkness toward the heart of the camp. Suddenly, a shout broke the silence. What was that? A rogue fighter called, scanning the shadows. Alara's heart raced. Now, she hissed, signaling her team to attack. Chaos erupted as they surged into the camp, the element of surprise on their side. Alara fought fiercely, her movements fluid and instinctual. She could see Darren taking on 2 rogue fighters at once, his strength and skill evident as he dispatched them with ease. Keep pushing, Alara shouted, rallying her team as they fought against the rogue leaders. The air was filled with the sounds of battle, the clash of weapons, the shouts of fighters, and the crackle of flames. But as the skirmish continued, Alara sensed something was off. The rogue fighters were regrouping, rallying under their leaders. She glanced around, her heart sinking as she spotted a figure emerging from the shadows, a rogue leader, a towering man with a scar running down his face. He raised his weapon, and Alara's instincts kicked in. Watch out, she yelled, but it was too late. The rogue leader fired, and Alara felt a searing pain in her shoulder. The world spun as she stumbled back, clutching her wound. Darren was by her side in an instant, his eyes fierce with concern. Alara, are you okay? I'm fine, she gritted through clenched teeth. adrenaline still fueling her resolve. "We need to keep fighting." Darren nodded, determination hardening in his expression. "We'll take him down together." As the battle raged on, Alara felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. The rogue leader was formidable, pushing back against the defenders with brutal force. But Alara refused to let fear dictate her actions. "Darren, we need to flank him," she shouted, her mind racing with strategy. "We can't let him regroup." Together, they maneuvered through the chaos, their movements synchronized as they approached the rogue leader from opposite sides. Alara's heart pounded as she prepared for the confrontation, her focus razor-sharp. With a fierce battle cry, they charged forward, striking at the same moment. The rogue leader stumbled, momentarily disoriented, and Alara seized the opportunity. She aimed and fired, the shot striking true. The rogue leader fell, his eyes wide with shock. As he collapsed, the morale of the rogue fighters faltered, their resolve crumbling in the face of their leader's defeat. "Push forward," Darren yelled, rallying their forces. "We can end this." With renewed energy, the defenders surged forward, overwhelming the remaining rogue fighters. The tide had turned, and Alara felt a sense of exhilaration wash over her. They were fighting for their homes, their lives, and they would not be defeated.